Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Thank you, Madam President. Supervisor Avalos. Avalos present. President Breed.
Here.
Breed present. Supervisor Campos.
Present.
Campos present. Supervisor Christensen. Christensen not present. Supervisor Cohen.
Present.
Cohen present. Supervisor Farrell.
Present.
Farrell present. Supervisor Kim.
Here.
Kim present. Supervisor Marr. Marr not present. Supervisor Tang.
Present.
Tang present. Supervisor Wiener. Wiener not present. Supervisor Yee. Yee present. Madam President, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, will you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Madam Clerk, are there any communications?
There are none today, Madam President.
Colleagues, are there any changes to the May 3rd board meeting minutes? Seeing no changes, do we have a motion to approve? Motion by Supervisor Kim, seconded by Supervisor Tang. Without objection, those minutes will be approved after public comment. Madam Clerk, will you please read the consent agenda?
Items 1 through 3 comprise the consent calendar. These items are considered routine unless, if a member objects, an item may be removed and considered separately.
Colleagues, does anyone want to remove any items from consent? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll on the consent agenda?
On items 1 through 3, Supervisor Yee. Yee, aye. Supervisor Avalos. Avalos, aye. Supervisor Breed.
Aye.
Breed, aye. Supervisor Campos.
Aye.
Campos, aye. Supervisor Christensen. Aye. Christensen, aye. Supervisor Cohen.
Aye.
Cohen, aye. Supervisor Farrell.
Aye.
Farrell, aye. Supervisor Kim.
Aye.
Kim, aye. Supervisor Marr.
Aye.
Marr, aye. Supervisor Tang.
Aye.
Tang, aye. Supervisor Wiener. Wiener, aye. There are 11 ayes on the consent calendar, Madam President.
These items are approved unanimously. Thank you, Madam Clerk. Can you please call the next item?
Item 4 is an ordinance to amend the administrative code to identify members of the Retiree Healthcare Trust Fund Board as city officers, provide the members with health insurance coverage, and exclude Retiree Healthcare Trust Fund contracts from the provisions of the Administrative Code, Section 21.02.
Colleagues, can we take this item, same house, same call? Without objection, this ordinance is passed on the first reading unanimously. Next item, please.
Item 5 is an ordinance to amend the police code to prohibit discrimination against residents or patients at long-term care facilities on the basis of sexual orientation or gender identity, to provide a right to seek investigation and mediation by the Human Rights Commission, as well as a private right of action, and to impose treble damages on violators.
Same house, same call. Without objection, this is finally passed unanimously. Item number 6.
Item 6 is an ordinance to amend the transportation code to prohibit drivers of tour buses not regulated as passenger stage corporations or charter party carriers from narrating while driving, and affirming the Planning Department's determination under the California Environmental Quality Act.
Supervisor Yee.
Thank you, President Bree. Colleagues, today I asked for your support on this legislation. As you know, I introduced this legislation following the tragic accident which took place last year directly in front of City Hall. What this really did was, in my office, was it started really a conversation around distracted driving and how it fits into Vision Zero and so forth. And then I guess at some point after the accident, Commander Ali from the San Francisco Police Department stated that on that day that there appeared to be an occasion clearly here, meaning the accident, where the driver was more focused on the landmark to his right, in this case, City Hall, as opposed to the roadway in front of him. After some research, I discovered that existing law does not impose any restrictions on the ability of tour bus drivers to narrate a tour while driving. This legislation will amend the transportation code to prohibit drivers of our tour buses from narrating while driving. Statistics show that drivers on cell phones, for instance, even even hand-free ones are 4 times more likely to crash and hurt themselves or someone else within 5 minutes of making a call. Texters are 23 times more likely to crash. More than 3,000 people are killed this way each year, and 300,000 to 500,000 are injured. This legislation just is another small step we are taking to reach our Vision Zero goals of 0 pedestrian fatalities by 2024. In fact, San Francisco's Vision Zero policy the board passed last year has made all of us be aware that we can do more to protect pedestrians and bicyclists. If you look outside in the crosswalk now, even the city engineer have also brought solutions to these type of issues. I can see that the improvement for the crosswalk right outside City Hall on Polk Street will be completed very soon. So again, it's one of these things where I feel like our effort to bring the whole Vision Zero policy has brought a lot of awareness to all of us, not only in creating legislation, but also people that are doing our city engineers and the law enforcement. So this month is Distracted Driving Awareness Month, and I hope that this legislation helps to shift our driving culture so that we focus just on driving to further prevent needless deaths and tragic collisions. When I introduced it earlier, about a month ago, I did mention that there's limitations in how much of this can apply locally versus what the state may have to do, and I was already in discussion with state legislators that represent San Francisco to see if they actually could carry a bill at the state level, which would make this concept of tour bus drivers not providing the narration a much more powerful solution to what's happening now. So, I hope that my colleagues will be able to support this.
Thank you, Supervisor Yee. Supervisor Kim.
Thank you, President Breed, and I am proud to co-sponsor this legislation along with Supervisor Yee and want to thank his office for all of their work. San Francisco is a beautiful city, and because of that, attracts tourists from around the world. And we want to ensure that the very people and companies that are helping to lead many of our tourists around our city and that are on buses throughout all of our neighborhoods in San Francisco are doing that safely and responsibly without endangering our pedestrians, which may be our city residents or even other tourists. And of course, in this case of the incident right in front of City Hall where a tour bus driver was both narrating and driving, hitting one of the members of our city family. And I think it's appropriate that we're able to pass this legislation on the week of Walk to Work Day, which is taking place this Thursday. And as Supervisor Yee mentioned, we will have a new signalized crosswalk in front of City Hall that will be turned on before Thursday morning, and that is really exciting. But we don't want any more fatalities that will be driving policy or street engineering changes because we lost a member of our city. And in this case, this was not only a resident of San Francisco, but also someone who worked here at City Hall, and many of us knew. And certainly we will be passing this legislation in her memory to ensure that no other resident are at risk by distracted drivers. So thank you, Supervisor Yee, for your work, and I'm really excited to pass this legislation today.
Thank you, Supervisor Kim. Supervisor Marr.
Thank you to Supervisor Yee and Kim for bringing this forward. I think it's a really important issue. In general, I think distracted driving of tour buses and other large vehicles, if not regulated properly, can be a serious safety threat to pedestrians and to our city. I think there's a lot of unfinished business regarding tour buses citywide. In the Richmond district, for example, we've had several tour bus issues and casino bus issues, including 2 years ago when tour bus changed route on 12th Avenue, snapped wires, and severely injured people on a very quiet residential street. I wanted to say also that several blocks away on 10th Avenue near Clement, casino buses commonly pile up in front of playgrounds and schools as well, laying over, and I think at times really harming the safety, but also the quietness of the area. I think this legislation is important to pass, and I really appreciate it, along with our other efforts in the past to try to regulate this industry. But I know state preemption, as Supervisor Yee mentioned, really limits local control. I wanted to thank Dylan Ouyang and the MTA staff for doing everything that they can, but I look forward to working with Supervisor Yee and others at the state level to address the barriers to safer streets with regard to tour buses and large vehicles in the coming year. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Mar. Supervisor Tang.
Thank you. I just want to thank Supervisor Yee for bringing this item forth. I know that I think it was last week or so where there was an individual who actually emailed all of us on the board who did state that in that particular incident, it was actually she who was narrating and not the driver. But with that said, I still believe that this is really good policy. I think moving forward, I'm sure that we've all been there where even if you're just talking to someone in the car while you're driving, that you can feel distracted. So I think that situation, despite what may have happened outside City Hall, actually brought forth a really good policy that we should absolutely put in place. So I will be supporting this today, but just wanted to at least clarify potentially what had happened at City Hall that day. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Tang. Supervisor Yee.
Thank you, Supervisor Tang, for clarifying that. That's why when I was talking, I really didn't tie the two together. I also wanted to thank the other co-authors of this legislation, including Supervisors Kim, Avalos, Cohen, Campos, and Mar.
Thank you. Supervisor Christensen.
I just wanted to add, I said when we first heard this that I definitely support it. I think there is a grave danger with distracted driving plus these large vehicles that are unwieldy as they are, much less if you're not paying attention. I've been contacted by a number of private tour operators, people who offer individual tours in either personal vehicles or vans, and it is my understanding that this legislation is not aimed at them, but at the larger tour companies, in which case I can support it.
Thank you. Colleagues, seeing no other names on the roster, can we take this item, same house, same call? Without objection, this ordinance is passed unanimously on the first reading. Madam Clerk, can you please call the next item?
Item 7 is an ordinance to appropriate and deappropriate approximately $11.5 million comprised of bond proceeds and general fund proceeds for the renovation, repair, or construction of parks and open space in the Recreation and Park Department for fiscal year 2014-15.
Colleagues, can we take this, same house, same call? Without objection, this ordinance is passed unanimously on the first reading. Next item, please.
Item 8, resolution to authorize the General Manager of the Public Utilities Commission to negotiate and execute a modification to the Memorandum of Agreement with the United States Department of the Interior, National Park Service, Yosemite National Park, to provide additional funding in the amount of approximately $6.6 million for a total revised agreement of approximately $34 million with a one-year extension through July 1st, 2016.
Same house, same call. Without objection, this resolution is adopted unanimously. Next item, please.
Item 9, resolution to approve a funding agreement with the Bay Area Air Quality Management District for the San Francisco Municipal Transportation Agency's electronic bicycle lockers project in an amount of $70,000 for a term in excess of 10 years.
Supervisor Mar.
Thank you. Colleagues, I'm really proud to serve on the Bay Area Air Quality Management District with Supervisor Avalos and Roger Kim, the Mayor's environmental advisor. This is a grant from the Air District to expand our electric and secure bike lockers in the city. I think many of us know that bicycle theft is a real problem. I think a couple of us on the board have had multiple bikes stolen. Me about 3 or 4 over the past maybe 4 or 5 years from my home or from around my home. We know that the city has ambitious goals to increase bicycling by 20% of the ride share by 2020. It's critical in order to accomplish that we address bike theft. I think when people are confident that their bicycles won't be stolen, they're more likely to ride. This eases congestion on our streets and makes parking much easier for those who choose to drive. It's also part of encouraging multimodal transportation that's sustainable and that improves our city's livability. In a report issued by the Budget and Legislative Analyst Office 2 years ago, the value of all bike thefts was estimated to be over $4.5 million in our city. I think since then, the Safe Bikes program launched by Safety Awareness for Everyone, or SF Safe, in partnership with my office, great police officers like Matt Friedman and the Police Department and the Bicycle Coalition, we've made significant gains in reducing bike theft and attracted national attention for our model in our city. I think the program combines focused police work, education, and a new bicycle registration program to deter theft. 1 year after launching the program, thefts are now down almost 10% in our city. But secure bike parking, as Supervisor Avalos knows from legislation he's passed, is another critical piece of the puzzle. And I think this grant helps fund the installation of a number of electric secure bike lockers in turn in public places that people can store multiple bicycles. I think this is one small step. Securing bike parking is needed on a larger scale in our city if we're to reach our 20% of trips by bicycle by 2020. And I look forward to working with Supervisor Avalos and many others of you, the MTA and community partners like the Bicycle Coalition and Safety Awareness for Everyone, or SAFE, to keep up the progress.
Thank you, Supervisor Marr. Colleagues, can we take this item, same house, same call? Without objection, this resolution is adopted unanimously. Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Item 10 is a resolution to designate those agencies qualified to participate in the 2015 annual joint fundraising drive for officers and employees of the City and County of San Francisco.
Same house, same call. Without objection, this resolution is adopted unanimously. Next item, please.
Item 11, ordinance to amend the planning code to adopt the citywide nexus analysis supporting existing development fees to cover impacts of residential and commercial development in the areas of recreation and open space, pedestrian, streetscape improvements, childcare facilities, and bicycle infrastructure, making findings related to all of the fees in Article 4 generally and certain development fees supported by the nexus analysis specifically, and making the required findings.
Supervisor Kim.
Thank you, President Breed. I will be supporting the legislation that is before us today to accept the citywide analyst nexus. But I did want to raise some issues that came up during the Land Use Committee hearing, and the very issues that I have been hearing from our constituents throughout our neighborhoods where a lot of our development is occurring. The Planning Department presentation last Monday identified a funding gap for infrastructure that is needed to address the demand resulting from new development, a funding gap that all of our impact fees will not be able to fund. Infrastructure, as many of you know, includes street widening, crosswalks, parks, increased muni services, pedestrian safety improvements, the very type of improvements that you expect to come along when new growth and development occurs in certain neighborhoods that had less residents or workers than they did before. Many of the residents in the district that I represent do support growth, they support development, but they're becoming increasingly frustrated by the city's inability to meet the growing demands on our existing infrastructure with more infrastructure. The Nexus study that we are supporting today makes it clear that we can increase impact fees to fund the current gap that exists, that there is a nexus to increase our impact fees from our private developers. As the Planning Department has made clear, this is a call from policymakers, not the decision from the Planning Department. And I wanted to make clear that I will be working to find a solution on how we can fund this existing infrastructure gap. I know that Supervisor Cohen expressed the same concerns at Land Use Committee, as she has also heard from her residents about the city's ability to match infrastructure with increased development. So I look forward to working with her office on identifying a new way to capture funds, whether it would be a property tax increment generated by new development through our infrastructure finance districts, or looking at increasing impact fees in a way that does not deter the viability of our construction projects. And so I'll be supporting this today, but I want to let folks know in terms of where we are headed.
Thank you, Supervisor Kim. Colleagues, can we take this item, same house, same call? Without objection, this ordinance passes unanimously on the first reading. Madam Clerk, can you call the next item, please?
Item 12 is an ordinance to amend the administrative code to change the composition of the Family Violence Council and establish a sunset date for that council.
Colleagues, can we take this item, same house, same call? Without objection, this ordinance passed unanimously on the first reading. Next item, please.
Item 13, motion to appoint LaTanya Dixon to the Veterans Affairs Commission, term ending January 31st, 2019.
Same House, same call. Without objection, this item passes unanimously on the first read. This motion is approved unanimously on the first reading. The next item, please.
Item 14, motion to confirm the mayor's reappointment of Joel Ramos to the Municipal Transportation Agency Board of Directors, term ending March 1st, 2019.
Can we take this item? Same House, same call. Without objection, this motion is approved unanimously. Next item, please.
Item 15, motion to appoint Supervisor Eric Marr as a member, term ending February 4th, 2018, to the Local Agency Formation Commission.
Colleagues, is there a motion to excuse Supervisor Marr? Motioned by Supervisor Kim, seconded by Supervisor Campos. Without objection, Supervisor Marr is excused. Madam Clerk, for item number 15, can you please call the roll?
On item 15, Supervisor Yee. Yee, aye. Supervisor Avalos. Avalos, aye. Supervisor Breed.
Aye.
Breed, aye. Supervisor Campos.
Aye.
Campos, aye. Supervisor Christensen. Christensen, aye. Supervisor Cohen.
Aye.
Cohen, aye. Supervisor Farrell.
Aye.
Farrell, aye. Supervisor Kim. Kim, aye. Supervisor Tang.
Aye.
Tang, aye. Supervisor Wiener. Wiener, aye. There are 10 ayes.
That motion is approved unanimously. Madam Clerk, can you please call item number 16?
Item 16, motion to reappoint Supervisor Jane Kim, term ending June 30th, 2015, to the Association of Bay Area Governments Executive Board.
Colleagues, is there a motion to excuse Supervisor Kim? Motioned by Supervisor Campos, seconded by Supervisor Yee. Without objection, Supervisor Kim is excused. Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
On item 16, Supervisor Yee. Yee, aye. Supervisor Avalos. Aye. Avalos, aye. Supervisor Breed.
Aye.
Breed, aye. Supervisor Campos.
Aye.
Campos, aye. Supervisor Christensen.
Aye.
Christensen, aye. Supervisor Cohen.
Aye.
Cohen, aye. Supervisor Farrell.
Aye.
Farrell, aye. Supervisor Marr.
Aye.
Marr, aye. Supervisor Tang.
Aye.
Tang, aye. Supervisor Wiener.
Aye.
Wiener, aye. There are 10 ayes.
Okay, that motion is adopted unanimously. Madam Clerk, can you please call item number 17?
Item 17, motion to appoint Supervisor Julie Christensen, term ending June 30th, 2016, to the Association of Bay Area Governments Executive Board.
Colleagues, is there a motion to excuse Supervisor Christensen? Motioned by Supervisor Tang, seconded by Supervisor Campos. Without objection, Supervisor Christensen is excused. Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
On item 17, Supervisor Yee.
Aye.
Yee, aye. Supervisor Avalos. Avalos, aye. Supervisor Breed.
Aye.
Breed, aye. Supervisor Campos.
Aye.
Campos, aye. Supervisor Cohen.
Aye.
Cohen, aye. Supervisor Farrell.
Aye.
Farrell, aye. Supervisor Kim.
Aye.
Kim, aye. Supervisor Marr.
Aye.
Marr, aye. Supervisor Tang.
Aye.
Tang, aye. Supervisor Wiener.
Aye.
Wiener, aye. There are 10 ayes.
The motion is approved unanimously. Madam Clerk, let's skip over our 3 p.m. special order and go to roll call for introductions.
Thank you. The first supervisor to introduce new business is Supervisor Yee.
Thank you very much. Today, I just wanted to make an announcement. As you know, my office has been participating in a process called participatory budgeting. This second year for us and for District 7. And this is the week in which we're asking residents to go ahead and cast their votes to give us the priorities that they would like to see in terms of the funding that is available for District 7. There's 25 qualified proposals that we put on the ballot, and they have until 11:59 on April 10th to cast their vote. And if they wanted to participate and show their interest, they could do this under sfbos.org/participatory budgeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Supervisor Yee. Supervisor Avalos.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Just a couple items for introduction. One, with the co-sponsorship of Supervisor Kim, I'm introducing an ordinance that will clarify that the inclusionary housing program applies to group housing projects. Group housing is housing that does not include an individual kitchen for each dwelling unit, like a boarding house. The Inclusionary Affordable Housing Program was created in 2002. The program is based on the fact that building more luxury housing increases the need for low-income workers and therefore increases the demand for affordable housing. The Inclusionary Housing Program has always been designed to apply to a wide range of types of housing. The definition of housing project, subject to the inclusionary requirement, has always explicitly included group housing. However, at some point, the planning department made an unofficial determination that group housing was not subject to the inclusionary program. However, this determination was never formalized in a written zoning administrator determination, which would have been appealed to the Board of Appeals. Therefore, we only recently became aware of this unofficial policy. And recently, developers have proposed a number of market rate group housing projects. And this has brought to light the fact that the planning department is currently not requiring them to comply with the inclusionary program. So, along with Supervisor Kim, we are introducing an ordinance that will clarify that the planning department is to follow the original language of the inclusionary housing program and apply it to group housing. I appreciate that building new market rate group housing is an attempt to create housing that is more affordable by design, but it is clear that our inclusionary housing program was always designed to require that these sorts of projects do their part to support the creation of additional affordable housing. And I believe Supervisor Kim also will be making comments during her introduction as well about this legislation. And colleagues, I am also asking the city attorney and the controller's office to support drafting new measures for revenue for affordable housing. I do appreciate the mayor's leadership on bringing together housing developers and people concerned about affordable housing in his effort to create a $250 million general obligation bond. However, there are many people who have come together in the room with the mayor last Thursday who feel that what's being proposed is not big enough, and we need to have a much more wider debate to discuss what the housing options should be, what the revenue option should be for affordable housing. The actual $250 million GEO bond is a smaller size than many people had anticipated, and certainly it's a size that's much smaller than the demand and the need is for affordable housing in various forms in San Francisco. So I will be asking the city attorney to draft a $500 million general obligation bond for our consideration in our discussion about what we move forward to the ballot this year. I'm also asking that we draft some special taxes as well that would generate funds for affordable housing. So the first special tax that I'll be asking that we get drafted will be a utility users tax for commercial customers, one that will tax carbon uses of carbon energy, but will exempt commercial property that uses renewable energy for their consumption. The other special tax that I'll be calling for will be a parcel tax on commercial property. And I'm targeting high-end commercial because that's the place where we have the greatest amount of wealth in San Francisco. And we're seeing our economy boom, but we're seeing it boom more for those who have much, but we're seeing a significant amount of doom for those who have little. So I want to make sure that we're actually in a very structural and deliberate way using the wealth that we have to uplift the boats of everyone in San Francisco and not just the wealthy and not just displacing those who can no longer afford to live here. We have a serious effort to win on this type of revenue at the ballot. It will take all of City Hall working together. It will take the mayor and his great popularity to help push these and build a coalition that will be strong enough to pass something that will be significant to make an impact on the crisis that many San Franciscans are facing who find the affordability gap well beyond their ability to stay in the city. So the rest I'll submit. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Avalos. Supervisor Breed.
Thank you. Colleagues, today, along with my co-sponsors, Supervisor Christensen, Cohen, Tang, Kim, and Campos, and the Department of the Status of Women, I'm introducing a resolution declaring next Tuesday, April 14th, Equal Pay Day in San Francisco. April 14th represents how far in 2015 women must work in order to earn what men earn in 2014. Equal pay is a symbol of how far we still have to go to achieve pay equity for women and minorities. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, full-time employed women on average earn roughly 78 cents for every dollar men earn. In San Francisco, that figure is only a slightly better, and that's 87 cents to the dollar. And for women of color, the gap is even greater. According to the American Association of University Women, African American women were paid 64% of what white men were paid in 2013, and Hispanic women made only 54% of what white men made. Whether they have a college education, work in a white-collar or blue-collar job, have children or don't, women, sadly, still in 2015 are paid less than men. Studies show that even when personal choices and experiences are accounted for across industries and at every level, the gender wage gap still persists. When women are undervalued and underpaid, they have a harder time making ends meet, caring for their families, and saving for retirement. The wage gap hurts women and families, and it hurts our economy as a whole, because we all know women spend more money than men. Just kidding, you guys. We are bringing forward this resolution to recognize the challenges that we face, but also to highlight what we as a city and a community are doing to solve this problem. I look forward to our press conference scheduled for next Tuesday on the steps of City Hall at 1 p.m., and we encourage all San Francisco companies and organizations to conduct equal pay studies like one of our local companies, The Gap, Inc. has done, and correct any wage disparities. Thank you, colleagues, and the rest I submit.
Thank you, Madam President. Supervisor Campos. Okay. Supervisor Christensen.
I have two in memoriams today. I'd like to bring attention to Laura Matos, who left us a few days ago. Laura was the owner of the Piccolo Press and Gallery in North Beach, vibrant and talented woman. She was also the wife of our dear friend, local artist and illustrator John Matos, who'd been such great help to us on the library and Joe DiMaggio Park projects. In a reminder that none of us should take for granted our time. Laura felt bad one week, was diagnosed with cancer the second week, and died the third. I'd also like to bring attention to Mel Patterson, a neighbor and collector of sports memorabilia. I came to know of Mel because of the Joe DiMaggio project, playground project, and his interest in Joe DiMaggio's history. Mel was the occupant of the apartment that caught on fire at 1050 Columbus last week. And we extend our thoughts to John Matos and to Mel's three children. And we ask that we adjourn the board today in their memory. The rest I submit.
Thank you, Supervisor Christensen. Supervisor Kim.
Thank you. I just want to add a couple of words to the ordinance that Supervisor Avalos and I are introducing today, and just to reiterate some of the points that he made. In 2002, when the Board of Supervisors originally passed our inclusionary affordable housing program, an ordinance that is being replicated throughout cities in our country, one of our most successful initiatives to ensure the production of affordable housing and to also ensure that our private market rate developers are a part of the solution in building units that are affordable to the vast majority of San Franciscan residents. The board had always intended that this program apply to all units that were built meant for long-term housing, which includes group housing. It's only became clear to my office in the last year that the planning department has been interpreting this ordinance differently. And we're finding this as large numbers of group housing and market rate SRO projects are suddenly coming for approvals to the Planning Commission in this heated housing market. These types of projects were not often viewed as viable new construction previously, but now smaller units, even market rate SRO units, are being viewed as viable new construction projects. As this comes forward, we want to ensure that these market rate developers are also a part of our solution and building more affordable units, and that planning is interpreting our ordinance not based solely on the number of units that a project has, but based on the board's definition of what is housing. So this legislation does reiterate the original intent that the board had always intended, which is that group housing participate in building affordable housing units along with our other market rate developers, and requiring that planning department have or bringing clarity to the planning department to mandate inclusionary housing in this category. I think that as we see more and more of these projects pop up throughout our city, it's important that we catch them and ensure that affordable units are being built in that. So I'm excited to co-sponsor this with Supervisor Avalos today, and the rest I submit.
Thank you, Supervisor Kim. Supervisor Marr.
Thank you. Colleagues, today I'm calling with Supervisor Farrell as a co-sponsor for a hearing in response to the recent gruesome discovery of a dead body of an elderly San Francisco woman in her 90s who had been dead for an estimated 5 years on a 4th Avenue home in the Richmond district. The hearing would address senior isolation and promote safer living conditions for our rapidly aging population. If we profess to be an age-friendly city or an aging-friendly city, I think we need much stronger systems in place to address senior isolation and also mental health support services, especially for isolated seniors. I've been directing our city departments and community agencies as much as I can to review current services available for seniors, especially those living alone or isolated in their homes. And at this hearing, we would like to explore preventative measures that can be taken to address the issue of senior isolation and adequate mental health services for our rapidly aging San Francisco population. I want to make sure that our communities are living, or our communities and residents are living in safe and sanitary conditions, not only for themselves, but also for the well-being of the neighbors and other residents living nearby. This hearing is part of my office's hard look and focus in addressing issues that affect our senior population. For example, safe streets for seniors as part of Vision Zero, our hunger and food insecurity work in the senior and disability communities, and our broader efforts for adequate and ongoing funding for aging-friendly city policies. Also today, under the theme of ending food insecurity and hunger in San Francisco, I am introducing an ordinance that would reauthorize our incredible food security task force in our city. Colleagues, San Francisco is a city that cherishes a rich tradition of great food and great restaurants and celebrating the cultural practices of eating and food. However, every day thousands of our residents go to bed hungry. Fortunately, we also have a dedicated group of individuals and leaders and organizers who have been addressing this critical problem in a systematic manner and an organized way. 3 years ago, we established our Food Security Task Force that's proven to be tremendously effective in changing our city's public perception of the problem of hunger and food insecurity, crafting policy directives and focusing budgetary priorities to focus on eliminating hunger in San Francisco. In November of 2013, the task force, along with the Tenderloin Food Security Task Force, published assessments of food security in San Francisco. Soon after the report was released, we unanimously as a board approved a resolution to take concrete steps to put money towards ending food insecurity and hunger in the city by 2020. So I thank all of you for supporting that grassroots effort of the Food Security Task Force and the Tenderloin Food Security Task Force. This led to a breakthrough in city funding through last year's budget process that provided over $4 million, additionally $4 million to programs that will concretely ease the pain of chronic hunger in our city. And today I'm proud to introduce the ordinance that reauthorizes this task force through July of 2018 so that I and hopefully others of us can continue to support their great work that started over 3 years ago. And I hope I can count on your support. Thank you. The rest I'll submit.
Thank you, Supervisor Marr. Supervisor Wiener.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Colleagues, today I'm introducing legislation to increase water reuse and recycling in San Francisco, and specifically to require that for certain large developments that the development include a water recycling system to recycle gray water and other types of water reuse to make sure that we are really trying to deal intelligently with our drought. California's water shortage is a severe public policy crisis, frankly resulting from many, many years of bad water policy. And it's not a temporary problem. Whatever happens in the next year or two, whether we have a rainy season or not, this is a long-term structural water shortage in California. Even when this drought ends, and we hope that someday it will, we will still be vulnerable to the same water shortage issues for decades to come. We need to take aggressive policy actions to conserve water now, and we also need to plan for the future. Last year, I held a hearing at the Land Use and Economic Development Committee, as it was then called, on the drought and what the city is doing around efforts, among other things, to use non-potable water for public uses, and what policies we could implement to improve water conservation in San Francisco. At the time, I was, and I still am, interested in legislation to require individual water sub-metering within new construction. This will improve individuals' ability to know how much water they're using and to conserve. Currently, there's state legislation proposing just that, and so we are holding off until we know what happens at the state. Also at that hearing, we heard a lot about the PUC's voluntary on-site water reuse program. Through this program, developers work with the PUC to voluntarily install systems to capture gray water from sinks and laundries, rainwater, and foundation water, and to use this water for non-potable uses like flushing the toilet and irrigation. The legislation I'm introducing today will take this program one step further by mandating these systems in certain developments. Specifically, it will require new large developments of 250,000 or more square feet located within the so-called purple pipe zone to install these on-site water reuse systems. The purple pipe zone is in the eastern part of the city, as well as some portions of western San Francisco. The legislation will also require developments citywide of 40,000 or more square feet to undergo an on-site water reuse analysis by the PUC to determine the feasibility of implementing one of these systems. It would not be a mandate, but would provide information. The legislation will require the PUC to report back within 1 year on the feasibility of retrofitting existing buildings in San Francisco for on-site water reuse systems so that we have that information and can make intelligent choices in the future as we manage this drought. The legislation, in addition, will make it official city policy for our city departments to use non-potable water to clean and irrigate parks and other public spaces. We should not be watering our landscaping and cleaning our public spaces with potable drinking water. City departments will need to report back within a year on the feasibility and needs required to implement these policies for our city departments. The savings from these water reuse systems are real. Mixed-use developments can offset 100% of their non-potable water demands through these systems. A development of 500,000 square feet can reduce its potable water use by 2 million gallons a year. While I absolutely support the development and construction of more housing in San Francisco, we need more housing. We need to make sure that development in our city is done in a smart and sustainable way. Just as we cannot do development without addressing transportation and affordable housing impacts, we need to make sure that our developments are taking into account the very real water crisis that we are facing. I know that there will be and already have been discussions about the costs of these systems, and in the long run, these systems pay for themselves because the buildings are purchasing less potable water. I'm happy to engage in those conversations with the development community and with others. But just to be clear, in the long run, we cannot keep going the way we've been going. We cannot keep flushing drinking water literally down the toilet. We need to move aggressively towards water reuse, and this legislation is a firm step in that direction. And colleagues, I look forward to the discussion about this legislation and to earning your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Wiener. Madam President, seeing no other names on the roster, that concludes the introduction of new business.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Can you please now read public comment?
At this time, the public may comment generally for up to 2 minutes on items within the subject matter jurisdiction of the board, to include the minutes and items on the adoption without reference to committee calendar, items 28 through 30. Public comment is not allowed on other items which have already been subject to a public hearing at a board committee. The board's rules require that you direct your remarks to the Board of Supervisors as a whole, not to individual supervisors and nor to the audience. Speakers using translation assistance will be allowed twice the amount of time to testify. And if you would like to display your document on the overhead projector, please clearly state such to SFG TV and then remove the document when you would like the screen to return to live coverage of the meeting.
Thank you. First speaker, please.
Supervisor Salvina, Jane Kim, Merkel Han, Kitty Tang, John Avado, Eric Ma, Norman Yee, Dick Campbell, Judy Christensen. Today is the day for the birthday celebration of Eastern Buddhist Taoist Confucianist goddess Guan Yin. So of her great mercy, great grievance, of mission of mercy, great mission of grievance, Almighty God, all ancestor, ultimate holy, have added comment. The headquarters must be in good, solemn state. Human talent must be cultivated. Co-petitioner must have good uniformity. Holy name should be prevail. And therefore, holy mercy should have good developmental direction in graduation of expansion. Of all of co-petitioners should know of such timely trend is a key function in focus importance of the holy way in modern way of flow and pathway. We should not neglect of timely chances. Or what internal external function of holy way should have good division. Of such a developmental plan should be well managed, well supervised, without being mistakes, so in deep real carefulness. Of the first initial awakening must develop of such awakening methodology seen formation for the later of the awakening. Of all the origin of destiny should be itself in good correction and awakening, not to omit or object to holy mission. Therefore, we have the truth of reality.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon, President Breed and supervisors. And Alex at the YMCA. Alex at the YMCA. Hi. Who's the Oakland mayor that won't cop out when there's danger all about? Mayor Shaft. And it's going to work out great there, Shaft. Whoa, what a woman. Great Shaft job. Like a bridge, Bay Bridge, over troubled Sinbad's restaurant. Won't you fix it up? Help 'em out like a bridge over troubled Sinbad's restaurant. Won't you fix it up? And I hope there's a dark cloud smoke on the cloud water, and it rains a lot now. Smoke on the dark cloud water, and I hope it rains a lot now. And you know what? I think it'll be good. Down the road I look, and there runs Mary, in the districts that you carry. It'll be good to touch the green, green grass of Dolores Park. And I'd like to say It's not unusual to be mad with anyone. It's not unusual to be sad with anyone. But if I find that your city's changed at any time, it's not unusual that you helped us out with budget dimes. Whoa, 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 thank you, fine.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon, Madam President, supervisors. The worst nightmare in San Francisco is a badge with no oversight. The Sheriff's Department conduct has become a pattern and now a practice. The Sheriff's Department has had a lot of choices, but it has come down to a half a choice. Enough is enough. Abuse of power, one of the most heinous crimes in the Sheriff's Department. There are too many officers inflicted with the disease of racial hatred, bias, bigots, and has bathed its own ignorance, infecting the Sheriff's Department and has been given harsh condemnation. It has become distasteful due to lack of communication and cooperation. Supervisors and the district attorney have a chance to catalog and diagnose a broke-down Sheriff's Department, or these abuses will continue and become a part of the system. The good cops don't have anything to worry about, but the bad cops, your day is coming. There must be addition by subtraction. Take them out the mix. I know police work is tough, but when you have illegal actions and a level of corruption, it taints and it affects the department. The Sheriff's Department has stopped policing what they should and policing what they shouldn't. No transgression and injustice just because they can. The Sheriff's Union and attorney are coming up with bow-legged statements to cover up the dereliction of duty and a pattern of collusion. The explanation that's given, here's another bone, now chew on it. It has become repugnant and inexcusable. There has been numerous of troubling incidents due to dereliction of duty of an elected official. It's time for Ross Mercarini to go dark. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good evening. United States is fascist country. United States is barbarian country. No another country evict people on the street. You are sitting here, 10 supervisors, and you think that you're a human being, but you think that I'm a dog or animal, that you throw me out on the street to sleep on the street, and people are eating from garbage can and drinking from garbage can. Who is barbarian, you or me, who says to you this? And not only you, in your Mayor Lee, in Obama, this is barbarian act. No another country in the world evict people on the street, specific 83 years old. Do you know that when you put people 83 years old on the street, it means that you gave them death sentences? Barbarian. By the way, when you wanted with Mayor Lee to stop eviction, he did it in Chinatown. Yes, he did. He went with the woman supervisor, I don't remember her name, yes, and you stop it. Good for you. Yes, good for you. But this is barbarian country. This country shouldn't exist. What they are doing to the people, million people on the street dying. Barbarian fascism.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Thank you, President Breed and other victims of the cabal. My name is Christopher Dahl, and I live at 6th and Howard, 14 meters and 10 blocks from sea level. I rise to comment on my manner of address, which is to say on my mention of sea level as part of my address. You have all heard about our Mother Earth, and she's getting warmer. And as part of that warming, the polar ice caps are melting. As they melt and run into the ocean, sea level rises. There are two questions to focus on: how high and how soon. My conservative estimate is 50 feet from Greenland and 100 feet from Antarctica. Let's assume that Antarctica will kind of stay locked up behind its encircling currents of water and air and not come into play for a century or so, but that 50 feet from Greenland will come fast, very fast, because the glaciers are moving fast. One was timed at 16.9 kilometers per year. Greenland is only 1,600 kilometers wide, or 100 years wide, and it will melt from the middle out. So that's 50 years until Greenland's full melt. 50 feet in 50 years, that's how high and how soon. And I live 52 feet from sea level. Is it possible for you to put together some taxi boat licensing legislation? I'd like the Rincon Island concession, please. Or we can start planning to put a dam across the Golden Gate. And boy, I'd love to see the sequel on that one. Thank you, President Breed.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon. John DeDonough from San Francisco. It's not just homeless men who walk the streets. It's mothers and their children as well in San Francisco. A picture from life's other side. Now the last scene is that by the river or the bay of a heartbroken mother and babe as the harbor lights shine and they shiver on an outcast who no one will save. And yet she was once a true woman. She was somebody's darling and pride. God help us, she leaps, for there is no one to weep. That's just a picture from life's other side. Just a picture from life's other side. A life has gone out with the tide that might have been happy someday. There's a poor old mother at home who's watching and waiting alone, just longing to hear from a loved one so dear. That's just a picture from life's other side. This is a composition written by Mr. Hank Williams Sr. in the 1940s, slightly edited by me. I say that because I don't want to take credit for somebody else's creations. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Tom Gilberti, 1961, Values and Perceptions. In the baby boom of 1961, I was one of 120 Catholic boys, 2 different classes, and if you got a 90 in 5th grade, and if you got a 90 or better average, you could become an altar boy. I chose not to be. The teacher went in front of me and he's in front of the whole class and said, I recommend it. We're one short. Do you want to do it? And I said, no again. It was my first mature decision. I also had a little problem there at the church, too, because I couldn't believe in only one Catholic Holy Apostolic Church to get to Godhead. I just couldn't believe in that only way. Right now, the American Jewish youth are having a hard time. The Israeli leader speaks with forked tongue, bombing, killing 2,000 people, crippling 17,000, destroying homes, referred to as mowing the grass. Apartheidization, colonialization of Palestinians, depriving Palestinians of life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. And we, United States, are an enabler. We're letting this happen. We need a different voice from the Jewish adult population to save their own children, our future. Here in San Francisco, about 45 years ago, in this building, an Italian-American Roman Catholic put a gay man in one of your seats. Right now, there's a bishop here in San Francisco that wants people to sign.
Thank you, sir. Are there any other members of the public who'd like to provide public comment at this time? You've already spoken, sir. Thank you. Seeing none, public comment is closed. Okay, now it is time for our 3 p.m. special order. We have before us an appeal of CEQA categorical exemption for this project at 53 State Street in District 8. Madam Clerk, can you please call items 18 through 21?
Items 18 through 21 comprise the public hearing of persons interested in the determination of categorical exemption from environmental review under the California Environmental Quality Act issued by the Planning Department on January 8, 2015 for the proposed project at 53 State Street. Item 19, motion to affirm the Planning Department's determination that the State Street project is categorically exempt. Item 20, motion to reverse the Planning Department's exemption determination. And item 21 is a motion to direct the preparation of findings.
Colleagues, I understand that Supervisor Wiener needs to recuse himself for this matter. Is there a motion to recuse? Motion by Supervisor Christensen, seconded by Supervisor Tang. Without objection, this motion passes. Thank you, Supervisor Wiener. Okay. At this time for this hearing, we will be considering the adequacy, accuracy, and sufficiency and completeness of the Planning Department's determination that the proposed project at 53 State Street is categorically exempt from the environmental review under CEQA. So without objection, we will proceed as follows. Up to 10 minutes for a presentation by the appellant or the appellant representative. Up to 2 minutes per speaker in support of the appeal. Up to 10 minutes for a presentation from the Planning Department. Up to 10 minutes for the project sponsor or their representative. Up to 2 minutes per speaker in opposition of the appeal. And finally, up to 3 minutes for rebuttal by the appellant or the appellant representatives. Colleagues, are there any objections to this proceeding? Seeing none, we are now in the process of having this hearing, and at this time, we will have the presentation from the appellant or the appellant representative. Sir, can you please identify yourself? You will have 10 minutes.
My name is Hector Martinez. I am the appellant and a resident of State Street. I also live on State Street with my partner and 2 boys who are born and now being raised in San Francisco. The project at issue is the project at 53 State Street. And this project is located in a neighborhood recently described by the San Francisco Chronicle as a leafy enclave, fanciful, and quirky. Corona Heights is a neighborhood of modest-sized homes that has a unique abundance of greenery and wildlife. One only needs to walk up and see that, in fact, there's plenty of trees, wildlife, and squirrels. The project sponsors propose that the demolition of a small cottage to build 2 2,200-plus square foot condominiums and a 2-car parking garage. The proposed project would greatly expand the footprint of the structure, reduce the front yard from approximately 25 by 25 feet to a 5 by 10 foot yard, or actually more of a patio, eliminate the side yard altogether, and reduce the backyard. The proposed structure would also be over 15 feet taller than the structure that's in place at the moment. The plans for the project were first submitted in late 2013. Between then and now, I and my partner have attended 4 meetings with the architect, half a dozen meetings with the neighbors, 2 hearings with the Planning Commission, and 1 failed attempt at a mediation. We have attempted to engage in mediation in good faith with the hopes that we could find an amicable solution with the project sponsors, but unfortunately that did not happen. During that time, our concerns have remained generally the same, and expressed again to the project sponsors that we did not approve of the mass or the large mass of the new structure. We did request to see a reduction in that mass in line with the character of the street and preservation of existing open space. Unfortunately, those concerns have been ignored by speculators more interested in making a profit than protecting our unique neighborhoods. Now, the consequences. The CEQA exemption is unlawful due to the site-specific and cumulative impacts of this project in combination with other projects in this unusual neighborhood. There are at least 6 proposed developments in close proximity to the 53 State Street project. They are 176, 178 State Street project, the 190, 192 Museum Way project, the 214 State Street project, the 2224 Ord Court project, and the 76 Museum Way project. Now, this out-of-scale project at 53 State Street will create pressure on nearby vintage homes and further increase the destruction of our neighborhood character. The oversized developments like this one in our neighborhood are walling off State Street to the significant detriment of front and rear yards, side yards, trees, greenery, vegetation, wildlife, neighborhood environment, and aesthetics. And by wildlife, I mean the abundance of squirrels, butterflies, bees, hummingbirds, and other animals we currently see in the neighborhood, which is very, very unique in San Francisco. At 53 State Street, a relatively affordable house is being demolished and replaced with non-affordable housing. Now, this board has recognized the unique character of my neighborhood and has taken extraordinary steps to protect it. This board made findings as to the special nature of the Corona Heights neighborhood that includes State Street when adopting emergency zoning controls just last month to protect our community character and aesthetics. Our neighborhood is under assault by increasing numbers of disparately large homes, and we incorporate the legislation herein by reference. The cumulative impact of these projects on the neighborhood is referenced in a San Francisco Chronicle article titled Growing Controversy, Developers with Big Plans Descend on Fanciful, Quirky Corona Heights. Now, this legislation is clearly substantial evidence of a significant environmental impact. What we see here as a solution for this board is that this board obviously did not include 53 State Street in the protective legislation solely due to its unique location within 500 feet of the residence of sponsoring Supervisor Scott Wiener. But today this board can act for the same reasons it passed interim controls to protect our neighborhood. What I'm asking today is entirely consistent with that legislation. And what we request is that this project be required to comply with the CEQA and have an environmental impact report to assess to address these significant environmental impacts that we have in our neighborhood today. I respectfully request that the board grant this appeal to require environmental review. Thank you.
Thank you. And at this time, are there any members of the public who would like to speak in support of the appellant? You will have 2 minutes. Please come forward.
Good afternoon, Supervisors. My name is Henry Eisler. Yes, I would like to urge you to overturn the categorical exemption. The building doesn't fit with the neighborhood, and the boundaries are always going to get pushed. The planning department seems to be in a place where they sort of pass everything through. And I can understand that there are reasons for that. But before it's too late, I'd hope that this board will see the need for some management, some governance over the growth of really all our neighborhoods, I'm sure, but I'm here about this one right now. I guess that's all I've got to say. I thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon, Supervisors and President Breed. My name is Chris Parks. I'm a tenant at 231 State Street. I'm here to request that the Board of Supervisors consider an environmental review for this project. And I'm very concerned about the effect this is having on the street overall. Can I use a projector?
SFG TV, thank you.
Just to show you, this is 53 State Street. I don't know if this is going to come out or not. Okay. You can see just up the street, there's small streets. This is just up the street from 53 State, 61 and 65 State Street, smaller homes. If you look to the other end, you'll see some backyards of smaller homes that give the character of State Street. I actually live way up the street, across from the museum, where there's a large development going on that actually highlights. I'm going to skip through some slides here because I'm running out of time. This is another picture of 53 State Street. This is the development that is going to replace 53 State Street. And then, and this is the article, what's happening to our street prompted this article in the San Francisco Chronicle. It's a demonstration of the cumulative effects on our street. And I just wanted to add, this is legislation sponsored by our supervisor. And our supervisor quoted, "This neighborhood has absorbed more density and is continuing to absorb more density, but also wants to retain what is amazing about this neighborhood, which is the absolute, the beauty, the green space, and you can have both. You can create housing, which I've advocated for, and also respecting the fabric of neighborhoods."
Sir, thank you so much. Thank you. Your time is up. Can we have the next speaker come forward, please?
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Duke Dolan, and I live at 245 State Street with my partner, Joel Smart. And I've been living in the neighborhood for like 29 years. And anyway, you know, I grew up in Hawaii. And there's one thing we always say about in Hawaii, we have the saying, it goes like this: "Ua mau ke ia o ka aina I kapono." That means that we have to take care of our land. And one thing I love about the Corona Heights area where I live, there's so much activity of animals, birds. There's a lot of walkways. You have the satin steps, you have the falcon steps, you have all this plant and trees around. And, you know, just recently we see hawks, you know, attacking pigeons, which I love to see. It's almost like being Mutual of Omaha every day. Anyway, I'm going to miss that environment. So what I'd like to do today is just to recommend that the board take a look and review the environmental happenings that could happen in our neighborhood. I just hate to lose the uniqueness of our neighborhood. Thank you and have a great day.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Roxana Althos. I live at 53 State Street 51 State Street with my partner and my two boys. Cachito, vení, mi amor, ven. No. So it's his 4th birthday today, which I don't think he really wants to be here. He didn't plan to spend his 4th birthday at City Hall, but we're here because we care. We care about our neighborhood, and we care about the neighborhood that we're trying to raise our boys in. We actually purchased this home when I was 40 weeks pregnant with Cassius. And as you all maybe know, when you're 40 weeks pregnant, you make decisions based on your emotions. And we made the decision to purchase the home based on our very deep emotional reaction to that street. It looked like paradise, and our home looked like a treehouse. We're about 2 blocks from Castro and the corner of Castro and Market, and it is a refuge. And it's not just a refuge for us, it's a refuge for all the neighbors that live on that street. I don't think I would have purchased a home there if 2 years from now, if this neighborhood is allowed to be turned into what the neighborhoods want to turn it into. And I think we're exactly the kind of family that you all want living in San Francisco, so the city would lose out. We are civically engaged, conscientious, bicultural family, and we're being driven out by the kind of development that's been proposed on this street. The last thing I want to say about this is the process. We've spent an inordinate amount of time participating in this process. It has been frustrating, and at times it's been offensive. We've been offended by the developers and the way they've treated us. Please look at the impact of this project from a cumulative perspective. You cannot look at this from a case-by-case perspective. You won't be able to see the very grave environmental impact.
Thank you very much. Okay, at this time, we will have up to 10 minutes for a presentation from the Planning Department.
Hello. Hi, good afternoon, supervisors. My name is Jeannie Poling. I'm an environmental planner with the Planning Department, and joining me today are Sarah Jones, Environmental Review Officer, and Tina Tam, Senior Preservation Planner. We sent you 2 memos responding to 2 appeal letters filed by the appellant. After careful consideration of the appellant's concerns, the department continues to find that the project is exempt from CEQA. The decision before you today is whether to uphold the department's decision to issue a categorical exemption and deny the appeal, or to return the project to the department for additional environmental review. The project site is on the south side of State Street between Castro and Douglas Streets. The site contains a 2-story, approximately 1,500 square foot single-family home that's set back about 30 feet from the front property line. The project involves demolition of the existing building and construction of a 4-story building with 2 residences. The total area of the new building would be 5,480 square feet. The department considered whether the project would have significant effect on the environment due to unusual circumstances, such as historic resource impacts, and found none. The department issued an exemption, and the project underwent discretionary review hearing before the Planning Commission. During discretionary review, the project was modified. The number of parking spaces was reduced from 4 to 2. Both units were reduced in size, and the 4th floor was set back farther from the front property line. The Planning Commission approved the project by a vote of 6-0. The department responds to the issues raised by the appellants. We have 5 main points. The first issue raised by the appellant concerns the exemption class. The appellant states that the exemption subsection of the project relies upon is not specified. Under CEQA state guidelines, Class 1L2, demolition of a single-family home that is not a historic resource is exempt from environmental review. The Planning Department's preservation staff determined that the existing single-family home on the project site is not a historic resource. Under CEQA state guidelines, Class 3B, construction of up to 6 dwelling units in one building in an urban area is exempt from CEQA. Thus, the project, which involves demolition of a non-historic single-family home and construction of a 2-unit residential structure, is exempt from environmental review under Class 1 and Class 3. The second issue raised by the appellant concerns cumulative impacts. The CEQA guidelines define cumulative impacts as 2 or more individual effects from separate projects which, when considered together, are considerable or which compound to or increase other environmental effects. The cumulative impact from several projects is the change in the environment that results from the incremental impact of the project when added to other closely related past, present, and reasonably foreseeable future projects. The project site is approximately 800 feet east of the recently enacted interim zoning control district, which requires conditional use authorization for certain large residential projects on Corona Heights. The appellant states that this legislation is evidence that the intensity of development on Corona Heights creates an unusual circumstance. However, the trend toward larger and denser housing is widespread throughout San Francisco. These interim controls would not, even if this property were under the in the interim zoning control area, it would not necessitate additional environmental review. It would still be exempt under Class 1 and Class 3. While these controls may focus development away from the interim zoning control area, the appellant has not described unusual circumstances or provided any evidence to support the claim that the project, in combination with other projects, would result in significant cumulative impacts under CEQA. The Planning Code guides residential land use to ensure that densities in established residential areas promote compatibility with prevailing neighborhood character. While the project is larger than other buildings along State Street, it is consistent with the Planning Code. The Planning Commission considered the project in the context of discretionary review and approved the project. Thus, the project, in combination with nearby development projects, is not an unusual circumstance in a dense urban neighborhood and would not result in significant cumulative impacts. The third issue raised by the appellant concerns housing costs and displacement. The appellant states that the project's inconsistencies with local plans and policies constitute significant impacts under CEQA, and that the elimination of affordable housing is an unusual circumstance. Issues related to the cost of housing are socioeconomic rather than physical and are relevant to CEQA only inasmuch as they are connected to physical environmental impacts. Land use impacts are considered to be significant if the project would conflict with any plan, policy, or regulation adopted for the purpose of avoiding or mitigating an environmental effect. An example of such plan that directly addresses the physical environment is the Bay Area Air Quality Management District's Clean Air Plan. The applicant has presented no evidence that any unusual circumstances would cause the project to conflict with any such plan. The fourth issue raised by the appellant concerns piecemealing or dividing a project into smaller projects. A project is defined under CEQA as issuance of an entitlement to a person. The project and other nearby projects are not piecemeal because these projects are sponsored by different individuals and are not functionally related to one another. The final issues raised by the appellant concern the loss of open space and impacts on trees and wildlife. The project would reduce the private open space at the front of the lot and remove and replace a tree in the public right-of-way in front of the project site. These are not unusual circumstances that would result in significant impacts. In summary, the appellant has not presented substantial evidence that would support the conclusion that there are unusual circumstances that justify removing the project from Class 1 and Class 3 exemption. Furthermore, the project sponsor has not presented substantial evidence that there is a reasonable possibility of significant environmental impacts due to unusual circumstances. The exemption determination complies with the requirements of CEQA, and the project is appropriately exempt from environmental review. Therefore, I urge you to uphold the department's exemption and deny the appeal. This concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And at this time, I would like to recognize Supervisor Tang.
Thank you. Just a couple of questions for Planning Department, although I know that much of it was covered in the planning memo, just for our public knowledge. Going back to the appellants, one of their first issues having to do with the exemption class in terms of Class 1 and Class 3. There was some sort of an administrative mix-up in which certain boxes were not checked on forms. So I was just wondering if the Planning Department could address that and whether that issue and that oversight impacts this project's exemption from CEQA.
Thank you, Supervisor Tang. Yes, the department's categorical determination exemption form has check boxes for Class 1 and Class 3. And when we first issued the exemption, the only Class 3 was checked, and it was an administrative error. It should have been Class 1. Later on, during the discretionary review, the planner that prepared the discretionary review claimed that it was Class 1. But the truth is it really is Class 1 and 3. But this inconsistency was an administrative oversight. It doesn't affect the validity of the exemption determination, because if a project meets the criteria for an exemption, it's exempt from further environmental review, regardless of when that determination was made. Thank you.
Okay. One other question having to do with the unusual circumstances. So I know that that's one of the prongs that you consider in terms of whether that you can be exempt from CEQA. And so the appellant just brought up a number of projects that are be happening in the area, most of which are going to receive a CADEX as well. And so in terms of the unusual circumstances, I know appellants are making the case that also combined with the cumulative impacts of the surrounding projects, that there may be, again, a cumulative impact. And so I wanted to know from planning then that given that there are these number of projects coming forth, all being exempted from review, if you can just kind of explain what, first of all, qualifies as an unusual circumstance, and just elaborate a little bit further about your determination that there is no cumulative impact.
Good afternoon, Supervisors. Sarah Jones, Environmental Review Officer. I will start with the question about the cumulative impacts. Those are cumulative impacts and unusual circumstances are two separate issues of consideration under CEQA. With regard to the cumulative impacts, there is an exception in the categorical exemptions. It basically says that none of the categorical exemptions would apply if there are cumulative impacts of related to multiple projects within the same area that are significant. There are, as were mentioned, a number of projects that are proposed in this general neighborhood. All of these projects are projects that are being processed and considered under the planning code. They are consistent with the planning code. They are pretty standard and common single-family home additions or demolitions and new constructions. They are happening all over the city. This is an active development time. There is not any evidence that these bring up any cumulative significant impacts, as significant impacts are defined under CEQA, and that is that there's not any substantial evidence that there are demonstrable, substantial adverse impacts related to any of the many topics that are considered under CEQA. So, yes, there is a lot of activity in this area. Yes, there is change happening in this neighborhood and throughout the city. Change is not in and of itself a significant impact under CEQA. As to unusual circumstances, that is, there's not a specific definition in CEQA for unusual circumstances, specifically because they are, in fact, unusual. But in this case, a project that we're talking about that is consistent with the planning code, whose size and character are addressed through other mechanisms in the city, such as discretionary review. Is a type of permit that is clearly categorically exempt. There is no indication of any sort of unusual circumstance. The most typical unusual circumstance we see would be a project affecting a historical resource. That's not the case here. As I mentioned, we are seeing many, many of these projects throughout the city. It is not unusual in any way.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And at this time, we will open it up to the project sponsor.
President Breed, can I ask a question?
Oh, I'm sorry. Supervisor Marr.
Thanks. I just wanted to ask the question that the appellant brought up. I think he acknowledged that a couple meetings ago we designated the special nature of the Corona Heights neighborhood, but it didn't include this area. Is that because it was so close to one of our colleagues, Supervisor Wiener's home? Is that why this area, State Street, wasn't included in that special zone?
I can't speak to how the boundaries of that of that interim control area were set. It is my understanding that clearly this project site is close enough to Supervisor Wiener's home that he was required to recuse himself from this consideration, but I cannot speak to the establishment of the boundaries of that area. I do believe that is the circumstance, though, that it is related to the proximity to the supervisor's home.
And can I just ask if this were within that zone, the new policy would require a new conditional use process. Would that have impacted this decision?
It would not. Conditional use approval is something that goes before the Planning Commission, but it doesn't change the environmental review determinations.
And Mr. Martinez makes an argument that instead of looking at cumulative impacts of the loss of character of neighborhoods like Corona Heights and the number of projects he names in his documents that you planning are using a drop-in-the-bucket, isolated projects approach. And I'm just wondering if you could talk about cumulative impacts as it impacts a neighborhood like this, because he's making the argument in some ways, I think one of his own ones, that this so-called fanciful, quirky Corona Heights neighborhood is being rapidly changed by a number of these projects, but that planning are looking at it as a drop in the bucket of a number of projects.
Well, I certainly wouldn't say we consider things relative to whether or not they're a drop in the bucket. What CEQA requires us to do with regard to cumulative impacts is that we have to look at whether the project's impacts in combination with other past, present, and reasonably foreseeable future projects would result in significant impacts overall, even if an individual project doesn't have significant impacts. And then if there are overall significant impacts, we have to look at whether an individual project that's under consideration is making a considerable contribution to that. So that is how we handle the issue of cumulative impacts. A significant impact under CEQA is, as you know, a substantial adverse impact that is a demonstrable impact. So when it gets to issues such as neighborhood character, which are ones that are matters that are more subjective than the issues that we are compelled to look at under CEQA as significant impacts. There are specific questions in CEQA that talk about land use character. Changes that are occurring in a neighborhood where construction is taking place, over whatever period of time, where houses are changing in a manner that is consistent with the planning code, would not, in our practice as a planning department, be considered a cumulative impact. We have procedures that need to be considered. We have other procedures outside of CEQA where such topics are considered. That is through the building permit process, the project review process, through design review, through discretionary review. This project did go through discretionary review at the Planning Commission. Anytime an approval is made, the issues of neighborhood character have to be considered. So there's multiple mechanisms outside of the CEQA process to consider those issues. They are not issues that rise to a level of demonstrable significance under CEQA that we would be raising as significant impacts.
Thank you.
Supervisor Mar, did you have any other questions? Okay, Supervisor Tang.
Thank you. Because this question has been brought up on a couple of occasions, I just wanted to address it since Supervisor Mar also brought it up publicly. The question around the interim zoning controls that were put in place was indeed because the supervisor who sponsored legislation does live within 500 feet and so was not able to place borders that close to his home. And so that was my understanding. But I think what is significant is what Planning Department did mention, which is that it would have just had to go through a conditional use permit review, but would not have changed their determination on the exemption.
Thank you, Supervisor Tang, for that clarification. And at this time, seeing no other members on the roster, we will now move forward to the presentation for the project sponsor or their representative. You will have 10 minutes.
Could we reset the clock?
It hasn't started yet.
Right. Good afternoon. My name is Brett Gladstone. I'm a lawyer with the firm of Hanson Bridget, and behind me, if you'll stand up, is Marvin Ten, who owns the property with his cousin, Vicky. And you've heard that there are speculative developers here. I'd like to talk about Marvin. He's here, and we can really clear that up a little bit. First of all, Marvin Tien and his cousin Vicky live nearby. Marvin lives in a rental unit on 16th Street, and Vicky lives on 19th Street. Their intent was to build here and to move into each of these. Marvin and his wife and 2 children wanted a large enough place for their children, 2 children, and visiting grandparents. The existing one-story building with a basement is only about 1,500 square feet. It was occupied by its owner and her boyfriend, Mr. Roberts, until 2013 when they moved out. There were no evictions, and it's been vacant since they moved out. It's in very poor condition, a lot of violations, and they didn't have the money to renovate it. It's a cottage, and of course it was not deemed historic. A picture of it is there. Oh, and could you please turn on the, down at SF.gov TV, would you turn on the photographs, please?
It's showing.
Great. And let's look at the new building proposed. The new building sits between Appellant's building on the left, and if you point to Appellant's building, and if you point to the building on the right, those owners support. The building in the middle, as you can see, has a number of setbacks, both at the ground floor and the very top. If you'll point to the setbacks that face Mr. Martinez, a number of extra setbacks to protect that window that sits there. There's a huge window on the other side of that, Mr. Martinez's top floor that looks out over the Castro, not shown here. Here's a close-up of the additional setbacks that were made over this last weekend to cut back the building on the right, to make sure that there's further light and privacy protections for Mr. Martinez there on the left. We're sorry the mediation didn't work out. As you know, my client was overseas attending his father's heart attack and couldn't make it, but we sincerely tried. The reason the Tians are not going to move in here is that they had wanted to move into a place that was large enough. The Planning Commission made a number of changes, however, and Elizabeth, Marvin's wife, was not comfortable given all the acrimony, unfortunately, that occurred at the neighborhood meetings, and she is not comfortable moving into the neighborhood. They will have to find a place somewhere else, and we wish them good luck. Whether these units will be rented, the unit they can't occupy, or sold, I'm not sure. As you know, the district in question is about 800 to 1,200 feet away. That's 3 to 4 football fields away. And it's been pointed out by Supervisor Tang, even if this lot was within that special interim district that you created, it may trigger a conditional use permit, but it certainly doesn't increase the amount of environmental review, and the Planning Department does not feel that the environmental review through a conditional use permit would have turned out any different than the environmental review given through the discretionary review hearing that was actually held. And I think that's important to keep in mind. This building is old, but it's not historic. It's a great underutilization of its lot. The lot allows 4 stories and a 5th story at the back down the hill. It allows a great deal more square footage than proposed. It's a single-story building on a lot that's allowed 40 feet, and we just don't have enough land in this city where there's an opportunity to do 2 units reasonably sized. I think the city needs to take advantage of that. The value, by the way, of Appellant's condominium next door is about $1.3 million under Zillow, and the value the Planning Department and the Commission found of the site of the current old building is about $1.5 million. So they're not that different. Again, the units are not monster units. They were very large when they went to the Planning Commission, but the Planning Commission, as you know, took out one entire floor, or recommended that it be taken out, which was done to get it passed. They took out parking. The Planning Commission took out 1,600 gross square feet of living area. I talked to Commissioner Richards, and he and Catherine Moore, 2 of your appointed members, took a lot of their free time to make sure the building was cut down sufficiently to make it neighborhood compatible. As a result of their efforts, their fellow commissioners and them passed it unanimously in its present form, which, by the way, we've cut back over the weekend to address the light well of appellants even further than the commission did at that time. talking a little bit about CEQA at the moment. It is true that displacement of a substantial number of people in a neighborhood necessitating the construction of replacement housing is by itself a significant environmental effect triggering an EIR. Appellant mentions that. But again, CEQA says it has to be displacement of a substantial number of people necessitating the construction of new housing. There was no displacement on this lot. The lot only had one couple living on it, and they owned it. And that's very important to keep in mind. The appellant also says that this project's going to cause a bunch of millionaires to be living in the neighborhood, people that are not like him. They're the people that they would rather not see in their neighborhood. But with all due respect to appellants, he and his partner, Roxanne, who spoke, they're both attorneys. They're hardworking. I think they will look and be much like the people who occupy these two new condominiums. Appellant has a condominium. There's new condominiums here. To afford these condos, yes, the future owners or renters will probably be a double income family, and they may be lawyers too. What's important is neither the appellant's unit nor the current unit on the property is an affordable unit. There's nothing affordable being removed, and by any standard, including the city's standard of affordability. I think what's important to keep in mind that under CEQA, one has to wonder whether the appellant's own building would receive an exemption or perhaps a negative declaration instead. After all, the appellant's building, and no, they didn't build it, but it does take up almost 100% of the length of its lot with a little side setback only at the very rear on one side. It wouldn't be allowed today under today's zoning. On the overhead, I'd like to put a list of people who supported this at the Planning Commission and couldn't be here today, but there will be speakers in any event a little later.
Excuse me for a second. I hear a lot of talking in the audience. Can you please, basically, if you need to talk, can you take it outside? Thank you. Continue.
Okay. There's a well-known CEQA decision by the name of Topanga Beach Renters versus Department of General Services in the year 1976. And what it says, it emphasizes that in order to require a negative declaration or an EIR, the government activity, the approval, has to have an adverse effect on groups of people broadly and not particular people, and that there needs to be substantial evidence in the record that this will occur, not mere speculation, not talking about birds that are there, but what kind of birds, what kind of wildlife, is it endangered, is this a special habitat? And we've just seen no evidence of it. There's a tree in the backyard. That tree will not be disturbed. There's a dead tree on the street that will be taken down and replaced by a larger one than required by code. If you look at the drawing, you'll see the very large front setback, which is unlike appellant's building. And we certainly expect that with the plantings to go on there, some of what's referred to as the open space will be there to look at. Again, the Topanga case says the issue is not whether the project will adversely affect particular persons, but whether the project will adversely affect the environment. All government activity has some direct or indirect adverse effects on some people, but that is not the issue. I think that if your board was to take the position that this lot with the lots that are not, this lot and the lots that are in the district that you created nearby create a cumulative impact, it's a dangerous thing to do because there's a great deal of new development going on in Noe Valley, throughout Telegraph Hill, Pacific Heights, and once we take a step and say the projects unrelated to each other, most of which are just home improvements, as the planning department said, and not new buildings, we go in the direction.
Thank you. Your time is up at this time. Thank you. So at this time, if there are any members of the public who'd like to speak in support of the project sponsor, please come forward. You will have up to 2 minutes each.
Can I have a translator? I just can speak in Chinese.
You need a translator?
Yes.
To speak Cantonese or Mandarin?
Cantonese.
Cantonese? Okay, can you give us just a minute?
Okay.
Is there any other members of the public? We need a minute to make sure we have a translator for you. Are there any other members of the public?
Hi.
Can you please line up here to my left? Okay, thank you.
Hi, thank you. So the appellant mentions frequently the cumulative effect of this building, and I think cumulative effect is exactly what I think you should be considering. In this case, though, the cumulative effect of not building, the cumulative effect of being part of making the building process in San Francisco risky and hostile, and underbuilding. We actually know what the cumulative effect of that is. It's high prices, housing insecurity, and displacement. It's easy to support building in general and easy to oppose displacement in general. It's easy to say, like, why isn't it easier to build? I wish someone would make it easier for more people to build houses so that we wouldn't run out of houses. Now is the time to take action to make it easy to build houses and not stand in the way of us expanding our capacity for people. Another consideration is neighborhood character. So for people who already have housing security, neighborhood character means a cute neighborhood. But for the rest of us, for 70% of San Franciscans who rent instead of own, neighborhood character means fear of eviction, crowding, living in substandard conditions, living hand to mouth, working multiple jobs, and the associated strain on personal lives. That is the character of San Francisco neighborhoods right now. So yes, you could oppose this project and preserve that neighborhood character if that's how you want the 70% of us who don't have housing security to live. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker. A translator is on their way, so anyone else who wants to speak who doesn't need a translator, please come forward.
Hi. I think that Sonia touched on a lot of important issues. I think one of the core things to remember is that this was over $1 million house. This is not reducing the quantity of affordable housing available in any way, shape, or form. What it is doing is adding another unit, another family that could potentially live in this city that right now we're all getting squeezed out. And I think that the more density we can have, the better the character of this city will be. It was mentioned, a couple sort of vague mentions were made. Who are the kinds of people who are going to be living in this housing? I think that that's a little, presumptuous. Who was going to be living in the $1 million cottage that was falling down before? Even just to make the place habitable would have taken additional funds. And that was made clear in the original purchase of the home, that this house needed extensive rehabilitation. So, I think that the things to keep in mind here are that we are in a true housing crisis and we need to increase the housing stock. And this is not reducing any affordable housing. This is not taking any low-income housing off the market. What it is doing is adding an additional potential unit and bringing more affordability potentially to this city. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
I support this project. I study about the buildings, the permits, and the maps and the drawings. They match the neighborhood. They match the right-hand side, and they match the left-hand side for the building. The new building in proposal match the length of both sides, match the length of the left side and match also the length of the right-hand side. And also they match the height. I don't know why the people doesn't like it. I don't know why. No, why they will increase about the value of the neighborhood, increase about the salinity of the city, and then we will bring in lots of tax revenues. They match everything. I don't know why the people are against for it. I'm in favor for it.
Thank you. Next speaker, please. And so those who are in need of translation will have 4 minutes.
4 minutes. Okay. 好開心喺我哋嘅三藩市裏邊，將會有一個由租客變成業主一個咁樣嘅改變。
I'm so happy to see that there will be a change in which the tenants will become the landlord.
講明我哋三藩市咧係好吸引人，同埋我哋呢一個新嘅業主咧，將會希望能夠喺呢度安居樂業。
That shows that our city is welcome our new landlord to become our new landlord in the city.
我希望咧喺呢個業主咧喺市政建設允許嘅情況下邊咧，佢嘅 neighbor 能夠俾佢一個機會去按佢自己嘅心目中嘅理想去建設好佢自己嘅屋。
I hope the city can do everything they can to encourage the neighbor to let the new landlord to do whatever he wants to establish the new building.
因為咧，我知道呢個屋主咧，佢可能好似我咁樣，希望佢哋嘅爸爸媽媽啦，同埋佢啲仔仔女咧，將來能夠一個地方喺度居住。
I know that the landlord will think the same way as I am, wishing everyone in his family to live happily in San Francisco.
希望呢個業主俾佢機會佢，同埋唔好妒忌佢。
I hope everyone can give a chance to this landlord and don't jealous him.
我諗呢個業主如果能夠建設好佢間屋咧，呢個 neighbor 咧可能會亦都會靚可多。
And I believe that if this landlord build his building in this neighborhood, and that helps this neighborhood develop too.
同埋咧，呢間屋建設好之後咧，可能佢間屋嘅價值亦都會升高咗，咁市政府將會可喺佢嗰度嘅地稅亦都會收多咗，係幫到市政府。
And that might help the city can get more tax as the house price are going up too.
同埋咧，當佢搬咗去呢個租客搬咗去佢自己間屋嗰陣時咧，佢而家住緊嗰個單位咧，可以提供出嚟俾另一些可以需要注意嘅新嘅租客去居住。
And when the tenants move to the new apartments, they can actually give their existing housing to the people who need it.
我希望呢個佢嘅 neighbor 能夠俾嘅機會佢。
I hope the neighbor can give this chance to the new landlord.
呢個亦都係我自己嘅經驗。我記得我好多年前我買咗間屋咧，我啲 neighbor 好支持我裝修咗我間屋。
And this is my own experience too. Like many years ago, I bought my house, and my neighbor welcomed me to do that and encouraged me to remodel my house.
所以我而家同我啲 neighbor 咧係好好朋友，我哋生活喺呢度好開心。
So now I'm very close to my neighbor, and I am so happy to live there.
希望我哋所有嘅業主、新嘅市民變成業主咧，佢能夠喺三藩市裏邊有一個好好嘅居住環境。多謝大家。
So I really hope that all the new landlords in San Francisco who can do great and live happily in our city. Thank you.
Thank you. And before we move to the next speaker, Mr. Law, if you can come back for just a second. This is Ray Law from Supervisor Tang's office. Could you please say in Chinese that if anyone needs an interpreter in the future and they know that they're going to be coming to testify at the board, they can call the clerk's office or their district supervisor so that we can be better prepared the next time.
大家好，首先呢，我就想講翻，我係羅德偉嚟自湯海大辦公室嘅。咁啱啱呢，我哋嘅主席就同大家講，如果大家將來呢係需要翻譯服務嘅呢，就請你預先同我哋嘅秘書處聯絡，或者你可以同你所屬區域嘅市參事呢就聯絡，等我哋可以盡早幫你呢就安排翻譯服務。多謝大家。
Thank you. And is there anyone else who needed an interpreter as well today for public comment? Okay, for just a second, I wanted to acknowledge, recognize Supervisor Campos before we move on with public comment.
Thank you, Madam President. This is not on the appeal at issue. It's actually on this question of the interpretation, and I don't know what the right way of when to raise it, but I actually think that it should be the other way around. I think that there should be translation available as a matter of practice, that people shouldn't have to call in advance if they're going to speak. I think that we should have translators ready to go for certainly Spanish and Chinese, and I would simply ask that to the extent that's possible, that we make that practice going forward.
Thank you, Supervisor Campos. Supervisor Christensen.
I was just going to say a number of us have bilingual aides, and perhaps we could coordinate that in a way that, like today, they could be available during board meetings.
Thank you. And we also have bilingual supervisors, just to throw that out there. Madam, can you please come forward? We're going to begin public comment again for this item.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. I appreciate it. My comment is a little bit more general than the ones preceding, and it's more of a question addressed to you, the leaders of our city. The mayor has said that we are going to add 30,000 units. We are talking here about a tiny little unit, and look at all the time and taxpayer expense that is involved in approving one unit. My question is, where are you going to find the bandwidth to abide by things you have approved, such, for instance, the priority development areas where you have considerable density? Where are you going to put so many people if each time you're going to have this situation? Another thing that concerns me, and it comes more in the form of a question than a comment, is that if you have a lot of supervisors who, of course, are going to say, okay, not on my backyard because of the blowback that they would receive. For example, Supervisor Campos already said, not in my backyard. And therefore, what mechanism do you have, you supervisors, have to speed this process, to solve the situation? I don't see it. What is going to happen, in my opinion, is that the priority development areas, and which was approved, for example, Supervisor Marr was at the meetings that I attended. Anyway, the question is, what are you doing about it? Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Next speaker, please.
Hello, I'm coming here today with my mother, who is 90 years old, sit over there. And the reason we came today is because we want to support this project. We want to let you know that we have a large family live here in San Francisco. And it's a core value that we added to San Francisco. This is something extremely good if you have a family bonding among your family and you help each other out within the family. So this is something that we contribute to the San Francisco. Of course, if you have a large family here, you need to have a comfortable housing for living. So if you think large family shouldn't be here, large family is a criminal, then I'm going to say no, because we definitely not a criminal person, and we add a good value to San Francisco. So if you can take care of your parents, your kids, and have a good family here, living here, then I think San Francisco is even more beautiful city than before. So I'm going to let you know that, please allow this project, and please value our family valued, again. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon. I think housing is very critical in this city, especially I walk through all the neighborhoods and I see all the cardboard boxes and people sleeping on the streets. And it also just brings up, like education. I mean, all the lives that are being lost as a result of miseducation in the city is just ridiculous. Especially when I have a piece of legislation that's been sitting on the floor for 2 years from a sitting president. It just seems like if President Obama said that we lag behind the world in math, science, and technology, I don't see why this board is ignoring it. Nevertheless, I don't want to take the light off of the present situation, but it just reminded me as I was standing in the line, I'll see all the Asian people that are here to support their issue. We have so many issues in the African American community, and we're so miseducated, we don't even participate, which is more of a reason why. But what's significant is that Deputy Gaines, she works for the San Francisco Sheriff's Department, and Lacey T. Edwards was her only son.
Sir, I'm sorry. This
After
is about
22 years,
you're off
she lost
subject.
her only son.
This is about a specific appeal.
I understand, but this is the only opportunity I have at addressing the issue that's vital to the African American community. So, if I don't do it, who else is going to do it? Ain't nobody else in here standing up.
Thank you. We'll give you information about when you can make public comment in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and you guys have a wonderful day. Again, the Lacey T. Edwards Commission on Education. Take a serious look at it.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. We 3 children living together. My mom and my daughter also come here. We help our parents to go to medical appointment. We take our kids to school and they play around. Our grandparents look after our kids when they were grew up. We as community children, family bring weapons to the community. San Francisco has a lot of shopping, restaurant, and a church. We like to live here. San Francisco is our community. We belong here. Please support big Asia families stay in the city and create more houses. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker. And if there's any other members of the public who'd like to speak in support of the project sponsor, please line up to my left.
Mr. Tian's case is a renter family becoming property owners not only can build to accommodate their own families, but also empty out units for future other families to rent in and stay in San Francisco. They have made a lot of accommodation to please their neighbors. They have done all they can. This, whatever they are doing, is keeping San Francisco vibrant, avoiding middle-class flight while giving upward mobility to renters. Families are the smallest self-contained self-help unit and alleviate the burden from the city to care for our elders and our children. We as Asian immigrants have already made San Francisco our home, have access to our ethnic services and restaurants in the city. We belong here. I hope neighbors welcome us with open arms. Being perceived discrimination on Asian family for being too big, need to live together, need to care for each other is not a good thing. Not building more housing during this housing crisis is not a good thing. Not disabling renter from having their upward mobility is not a good thing. Please support this project.
Thank you very much. Are there any other members of the public that'd like to speak in support of the project at this time? Seeing none, public comment is closed. And at this time, Supervisor King, you wanted to make comments before the 3-minute rebuttal?
Yes, just one question to Planning Department staff. I know that the project sponsors mentioned this in the report, but did not mention it, having to do with a recent California Supreme Court case, the Berkeley Hillside preservation case, and how it is that we determine whether to issue a categorical exemption. So I just wanted to ask Planning Department whether, based on this case, there's anything that we're changing about the way that we're issuing these CADXs, or if it's really just kind of what our planning department has been going off of all along anyway.
Thank you, Supervisor Tang. Again, Sarah Jones, Environmental Review Officer. There's nothing about the decision in the Berkeley Hillside case that would change how we consider or issue categorical exemptions. We do very much appreciate the clarification of the considerations of categorical exemptions that came out of that decision.
And just for, again, public knowledge, if you can just state what that case kind of stated or reemphasized, just for the public's benefit, I think that would be helpful for future, in case this question comes up.
City Attorney. I'll ask our City Attorney too.
Good afternoon, through the chair, Deputy City Attorney Marlena Byrne. Just to clarify, the Berkeley Hillside case, which was recently issued by the California Supreme Court, they've actually taken it up on rehearing. So during that time, the decision is on hold. But the decision that they issued is entirely consistent with the advice that our office has been providing to the department and to this board, which essentially the case concerned this unusual circumstances test, which under CEQA, if you have a project project that otherwise meets the requirements to get a categorical exemption, the city cannot issue one if there are unusual circumstances associated with the project or with its location that result in significant impacts on the environment. And so the court found that when you're looking at that and applying that standard, that the city should first, it's sort of a two-part question. First, are there unusual circumstances related to the project or the site? And for that, the city should look to substantial evidence in the record. And then if the city finds that there either are or are not unusual circumstances based on substantial evidence, only then does the city look and apply the fair argument standard of whether those unusual circumstances result in a significant impact on the environment. So it's a two-part test. That's what we've been advising the city and the board all along. So it's very consistent with our past advice.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Supervisor Tang. And at this time, we will have up to a 3-minute rebuttal by the appellant or the appellant representative.
Thank you. If there are not unusual circumstances affecting Corona Heights, why did this board adopt interim measures? Why? Because there are unusual circumstances. I challenge the Planning Commission and this board to identify where anyone has assessed the cumulative impact of 53 state seats, 176, 178 State Streets, 190, 192 Museum Way, 214 State Street, 2224 Ord Court, and 76 Museum Way. It's not in your documents. You've never looked at the cumulative impact of all this development on our neighborhood. So you logically, when you look at this from a case-by-case perspective, conclude that there's no unusual circumstances or cumulative impact. I think this project would really benefit from a little more process, a deeper understanding of what's happening to our neighborhood. I think that the interim measures are substantial evidence of unusual circumstances, but the Planning Commission seems an intent in ignoring them. I also wanted to just remark that a condo directly across the street from us just sold for $3 million. A condo that is the same size as the ones proposed by the project sponsors. So if a $3 million condo is going to give relief to middle-class flight and solve the problem of renters and affordable houses, then we live in a much more prosperous city than I thought we did. I also wanted to say that exercising my rights does not make me hostile. And that's the way we have been painted here today. Because we exercised our procedural rights, we are hostile. That is unfair and it's offensive. I am a human rights lawyer. I've never charged a penny for my services during 15 years of practice. And I have no problem with anyone of any character becoming my neighbor. So I am very disappointed that those allegations have been made here today.
And just to comment on the cumulative impact, essentially what's happening on State Street is what we see what's already happened on Market Street. There's high density there. It's worked out well. There's more happening. But what's happening here is that we're seeing it's branching off now up State Street. And that's the concern we have. That's a cumulative impact we're seeing because we're seeing all these projects starting to line up. And I submitted a letter earlier where it shows all the people who are the owners of these properties are LLCs. It's all speculative, and it's all having a substantial impact on our neighborhood. And that's what we're concerned about.
Thank you very much, sir. Okay, this hearing has been held and is now closed. And this item is now in the hands of the board. So, colleagues, items number 19, 20, and 21 are before us. Supervisor Tang.
Thank you very much. I just want to thank all the parties who came out and presented on this item. I have taken on this appeal case on behalf of Supervisor Wiener, given that he had to recuse himself, and have really tried to do my best to really put myself in the shoes of the district supervisor had he been able to make a vote and decision on this, really trying to understand everything that has been happening in our city and in this neighborhood in particular. I think that in terms of the 5 major issues that were pointed out from the appellants, I actually do feel that the planning department had adequately addressed them, and that many of the issues that came about actually do not count under CEQA, or the planning department has made particular determinations based on, again, the CEQA guidelines. I think that what we have seen from several appeals before this board, really are a lot of issues that are very easy to conflate with these appeals. They really have to do with affordability and a lot of socioeconomic issues, livability in our city, neighborhood characteristics, all of that. And I think that they're very important, and I think that they need to be addressed, absolutely. And I think that Supervisor Wiener, for example, in his district in particular, has taken it on through a legislative format, which I think that actually, despite this appeal, I think that if neighbors want to continue this conversation, absolutely have a vehicle to do so. And I actually do think that, it can be addressed legislatively, or even through other processes, such as upon a building permit issuance, or through the DR hearing. I did watch the Planning Commission. They struggled with this decision. I think that from their first hearing, they were very unhappy with the project that was brought forth. They thought it was too big. It was 5 stories. It had 4 garages. They really felt that it was one of those monstrous homes. And then I think that after that hearing, a series of at least 10 changes were made. I'm really glad that the project sponsors made those changes. However, they weren't actually particular to CEQA issues, though. But in any case, I'm really glad that they made those changes. And so in listening to the planning commissioners, I know that, again, they struggle with this balance between whether this fits in with the characteristics of the neighborhood, the affordability issues. But at the end of the day, I think that they all unanimously supported it because really this is a code-compliant project. Didn't require any variances. It was a single-family home, so there were no rent control issues here, no eviction issues on this particular property. And I think that, just hearing from both sides, I think it's actually offensive to talk more in generalities, to say that everyone is a speculator. As we've seen in this case, I do believe that the project sponsors were actually trying to live here. They lived in the neighborhood. They were trying to live here with their multi-generational families. And so, those are all issues that are non-CEQA related that I hope that you can privately work out on your own. But at the end of the day, I have not heard substantial evidence in terms of the CEQA determination, the exemption that was issued today. And so I think that for the purposes of our decision, again, in terms of the environmental review, I would be willing to support and uphold the planning department's decision to issue a categorical exemption. So I would like to obviously hear from colleagues, but I would like to make a motion to approve item 19 and table items 20 and 21.
Okay, Supervisor Tang has made a motion to approve item 19 and table item 20 and 21, seconded by Supervisor Cohen. Colleagues, seeing no other names on the roster, Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Supervisor Yee.
Aye.
Yee, aye. Supervisor Avalos. Avalos, aye. Supervisor Breed.
Aye.
Breed, aye. Supervisor Campos.
Aye.
Campos, aye. Supervisor Christensen.
Aye.
Christensen, aye. Supervisor Cohen.
Aye.
Cohen, aye. Supervisor Farrell. Farrell, aye. Supervisor Kim. Kim, aye. Supervisor Marr.
Aye.
Marr, aye. Supervisor Tang.
Aye.
Tang, aye. Supervisor Wiener is absent. There are 10 ayes.
Colleagues, this categorical exemption is finally affirmed unanimously.
Madam President, just to correct, Supervisor Wiener is excused, not absent.
Thank you. At this time, we will hear our second 3 p.m. special order. We have before us now the appeal of the CEQA Community Plan exemption for this project at 350 Bryant Street in District 6. Madam Clerk, can you please call items number 22 through 25?
Item 22 through 25 comprise the public hearing of persons interested in the issuance of a January 8, 2015 community plan exemption by the Planning Department for the proposed project at 340 Bryant Street, exempting the project from further environmental review under the California Environmental Quality Act. Item 23, motion to affirm the Planning Department's community plan exemption, determination exemption for the State Street project from further environmental review. Item 24 is a motion to reverse the determination, and item 25, motion to direct the preparation of findings.
Okay, and Supervisor Kim, you have opening remarks for this item.
Thank you again, President Breed. The appeal that is before us today is brought by an appellant that has brought up numerous concerns about pedestrian safety in and around this project site on 340 Bryant, and also the city's role in approving a project with very peculiar site conditions, which a word that you'll hear a number of times throughout this appeal, as it is at the base of the Bay Bridge. This project is a unique site. I actually had to go and scout it because I didn't actually realize there was a building here, but it is a site that is surrounded by all four sides by Caltrans property. Its location is at the base of the 180 entrance on Bryant between 2nd and Beale Street, and many of you have probably passed by it as you drive onto the bridge, not realizing that it is there. There has been very productive conversations outside of this hearing that do address many of the specific pedestrian issues that were raised in this appeal amongst neighbors, the project sponsor, and SFMTA and our office. And the developer has voluntarily agreed to the installation of a crosswalk with a traffic signal in front of the 340 Bryant site, as well as other improvements through an independent MOU with neighborhood representatives. I want to be clear that this is outside of the scope of the CEQA appeal and has been done separately from this appeal, but I did want to point it out because a number of pedestrian safety concerns have come up, and I know members have heard via email from our residents who are concerned about pedestrians walking in and around this site. The question before us today, of course, is the adequacy of the Planning Department's community plan exemption determination for this project, and I look forward to hearing both from the appellant, the project sponsor, and the Planning Department on this appeal. Thank you.
Okay, for this hearing, we will consider the adequacy, accuracy, and sufficiency and completeness of the Planning Department's determination that the proposed project at 340 Bryant Street falls within a CEQA community plan exemption. Without objection, we will proceed as follows. Up to 10 minutes for a presentation by the appellant or the appellant representative. Up to 2 minutes per speaker in support of the appeal. Up to 10 minutes for a presentation from the Planning Department. Up to 10 minutes for the project sponsor or their representative. And up to 2 minutes per speaker in opposition of the appeal. And finally, up to 3 minutes for rebuttal by the appellant or the appellant representative. Colleagues, are there any objections to these proceedings? Seeing none, we will move forward and open it up for 10 minutes with the presentation of the appellant or the appellant representative. Ma'am, can you please identify yourself?
My name is Sue Hester. I'm the attorney for San Franciscans for Reasonable Growth. In 2 days, you all are going to be leading troops to walk to work. This is Walk to Work Week. Thursday is Walk to Work Day. And this board and the Planning Commission also adopted Vision Zero about pedestrian accidents. Would you turn on the speaker, the overhead? The site is here. It's an unusual site surrounded. This is not a cumulative impact analysis challenge. This is site-specific. There is a building. There is a freeway merger to get onto the Bay Bridge. There is the HOV lanes down Bryant Street that are counterflow on Bryant. Most of us think of it as eastbound. It's westbound there. The merger happens right here on Sterling Street. Traffic merges from the west and from the east. And that is an important factor in this case. The building was changed into office building by decision which had this environmental decision. It's a community plan exemption. Community plan exemptions based on the Eastern Neighborhoods EAR, which had study for traffic 10 years ago. Today, it's a dangerous site. Tomorrow, it's a dangerous site. We applaud the fact that they are installing the lighting. We have here, I can't reach this, is hard, a plan by ACOM. ACOM was hired by the project sponsor, and they drafted something dated March 5th. March 5th was 2 months after the Planning Commission decision and 2 months after the Planning Commission evaluation, Planning Department evaluation. And it shows a crosswalk, hurrah. But it also doesn't show the other building entrance. It was one of those things that I looked at, and I puzzled over these plans, and I was trying to understand it. Put this plan back here. There's an entrance right here. How would you know that's a building entrance? That is just an unlabeled space. And then I looked at the renderings in the ACOM analysis, which we got Monday afternoon at 4 o'clock, last Monday. And here's a rendering that I saw, and I stuttered. I was looking at this to understand how the traffic approaching from the east was cued for that. But I couldn't understand why the people, they're all men in the photographs, all tall men, tech industry. And here we have men walking away from the crosswalk. And the entrance is supposed to be here. Is the entrance even shown? The entrance is on the plan. So why are they walking over there? I was really puzzled by that. And I started looking at this, and I figured out what it is. There's a building entrance that isn't shown on any of the plans. There just appears. I have been trying to get plans from the planning department, and I finally talked to the zoning administrator about an hour or 2 hours ago. Yes, there is an entrance. There's an entrance right here, and there's a walkway right here. And where does that walkway head? There are two big places of impact for pedestrians. One we have a solution for. I think we have a decent solution for the crosswalk here. For a building entrance, the only building entrance that shows up on the plans here. What about this? Where does this head? It heads into the attractive nuisance of Sterling Street merger of traffic. Traffic is coming two ways on Bryant Street. It merges at Sterling Street and gets right onto the bridge. Right onto the bridge. You don't have any queue. You get a fast lane. And so where the traffic is merging is really dangerous. There's currently a crosswalk here and there. Handicap bumps. So if you have people going out of this exit, going down this sidewalk, where do they head? They head straight for the 2nd Street. Pardon me. They head straight for Sterling and the north side of Bryant Street. I gave people my questions yesterday afternoon. And the questions include, why does the 340 Bryant Street exit and entrance lead southwest to the merger point for bridge traffic going onto the bridge, instead of directing people to the other entrance? I really don't understand it. We had a meeting, the first meeting of the community was a week ago yesterday at 4 o'clock. ACOM came in, gave these plans at us and said, we want your response right on the spot. And I missed something. I missed the direction the pedestrians were walking. I take that on myself. I missed something. There's an enormous safety issue here. The planning department didn't analyze this exit. I talked to the zoning administrator. I pleaded with him to just look at the plans with me because I didn't understand it. Environmental review didn't do it. Planning department didn't do it. We right now have a failure in 3 areas of the planning department: environmental review, planning department staff, planning commission. What does Vision Zero mean? do you really care only about the existing places that there are accidents, or do you care about heading them off at the pass by a really thorough evaluation? This evaluation should have happened before the project was approved by staff at both levels. Long-term, actually, we have another level. Long-term planning, which did the rezoning for eastern neighborhoods, also didn't look at this. So planning department, 3 levels, planning commission, never looked at really having a solution to this. And I will give my rest of my time to someone else.
Thank you. And now I will open it up. Oh, are you continuing with the presentation?
Our time.
Okay.
I'm Bob Planthold. I'm highly experienced and knowledgeable in pedestrian safety. I want to address the 3 questions you said: adequacy, accuracy, and consistency. No, it's not. Notice, you don't hear anything from Caltrans. You heard this is surrounded by Caltrans properties. I'm in contact with deputy directors. I'm in contact with people in District 4. Caltrans never got a copy of the draft EIR that they were supposed to. Caltrans said the project sponsor never filed for the encroachment permit that they were supposed to. Caltrans says that where the crosswalk is located is underneath a ramp, and that's not something they will allow or want to permit. So there's problems right away that a major agency on whose right-of-way this is saying there's problems, but you don't hear it because they weren't communicated with. I'll go further. I believe they're using outdated and not current standards in their analysis. The acting editor for the California Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices and secretary for the Traffic Control Devices Committee has said that beginning with the 2012 traffic collision, there was a change in methodology to include collisions that occur within a crosswalk. Caltrans changed and expanded its definition of crosswalk last year. It would include much of what now the city says is its own. So suddenly you're ignoring an agency from a superior jurisdiction. The new methodology captures 33% of pedestrian injuries occurring rather than only 13% currently. And finally, the Federal Highway Administration has updated their definition of an intersection to include crosswalks. Now, Caltrans staff said today, even today, the plans they've been given show a crosswalk, but no curb ramp. You may think that's a standard. You may think it's a given. I complain once or twice a month to the Mayor's Office on Disability or Public Works about mismatched curb ramps in new construction, about inaccurately done curb ramps. So I'm saying Caltrans has pointed out through me in my conversations all up the line, there's many deficiencies, neglect, problems with this. That's why it does not meet the standard of adequacy or accuracy. You ought to say no.
Thank you very much. Is that the conclusion of your presentation? Thank you. And at this time, we will open it up to public comment for any members of the public who are interested in providing public comment in support of the appellant. Sir, please come forward.
Good afternoon, Supervisors. My name is Charles Rathbone. I'm a resident of District 6 and a fellow member of our South Beach District 6 Democratic Club alerted me to what I'm thinking now of the strange case of 340 Bryant. I went online and looked at the Google Earth last night, the Street View, and explored the site. It's absolutely amazing that there's no pedestrian access whatsoever. I cannot think of any other location in the entire 49 square miles that there's no formal crosswalk or any kind of pedestrian access. I believe that should have been a flashing red light in the approval process. And I suggest to you that the approval process was insufficient and that the that the appeal should be accepted on that grounds. My overall concern is that pedestrian safety in this case seems to be an afterthought, and it really should be a priority. So I urge you to support the appeal. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other members of the public who'd like to provide public comment, please come forward.
Excuse me. Good afternoon. My name is Dorothy Dana. I live on 2nd and Bryant Street. I live about a block, half a block from where this site is. My concern is, well, for over a year at different in different situations and at different sites, for instance, the proposed 2nd Street improvement overhaul, I've been talking about the dangerous situation for people on Bryant Street, and nothing happens. Right now, there's a very dangerous situation on 2nd, as cars are coming east. The cars are coming east. They turn very quickly onto 2nd Street. We have had several serious accidents. One is somebody who's down my hall who was bumped by one of those cars, thrown up in the air, came down on her back, and she is seriously injured. So this is an area where sometimes it's not too bad, but many times the people that are going on this entrance in the late afternoon to evening, and the Giants games, it's even worse. This is a very, very it's a very, very dangerous and confusing situation. There's no. Let me just finish. There are no traffic patrol people there. I'm just concerned because when a project like this goes through without anybody in planning looking at what it might mean to the people who live there, I think you're forgetting the taxpayers in this mix and the safety of your residents. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other members of the public who'd like to provide public comment in support of the appellant? Seeing none, public comment is closed. And now we will move on to a presentation from the Planning Department. You have 10 minutes.
Good afternoon, President Breed and members of the board. I'm Kansai Uchida, Environmental and Transportation Planner with the Planning Department. Joining me are Devyani Jain, Senior Environmental Planner, Erica Jackson, Current Planner, Elizabeth Waddy, Assistant Director of Current Planning, and Sarah Jones, Environmental Review Officer. As previously stated, the subject of this appeal hearing is the Community Plan Exemption, or CPE, prepared by the Planning Department for the proposed project at 340 Bryant Street. The proposed project includes conversion of the upper 3 stories of an existing 4-story commercial industrial building to office use. Exterior features to be added include signage and a roof deck, and the ground floor would remain commercial industrial space. In the CPE, the department found that the proposed project would be consistent with the development density established by the East Soma Community Plan and would not result in any significant environmental impacts beyond those already identified in the Eastern Neighborhoods Rezoning and Area Plan's Final Environmental Impact Report, or Eastern Neighborhoods EIR.
Mr. Bushido, could you speak closer to the microphone?
Sure, sorry.
Thank you.
In such situations, the state CEQA guidelines indicate that a CPE is warranted and no further environmental review is required. Thus, we believe that the CPE was appropriately prepared. The matter before the board is whether to uphold the department's decision to issue a CPE and deny the appeal, or to overturn the department's decision and return the project to the department for additional environmental review. We sent you a packet dated March 16, 2015, responding in detail to the issues raised in the appellant's letter. I should also note that after submitting our written response, we received additional emails from 3 neighbors that echoed the concerns raised by the appellant. Next, I will briefly summarize the Planning Department's response to the appellant's concerns. With regard to the appellant's concern about pedestrian access to the site, pedestrian access does exist via existing sidewalks and unmarked crosswalks adjoining the existing building. It is anticipated that pedestrians would continue to use the same access routes to reach the building as under the prior commercial industrial use. Though the existing intersection designs do not favor pedestrian access, the street configuration is an existing condition that would not be created or changed by the proposed project, and therefore is not an environmental impact of the project. Furthermore, in the Eastern Neighborhoods EIR, which is incorporated by reference into the CPE, the department acknowledged that adverse pedestrian conditions exist in East Soma, where the project is located. The EIR described higher vehicle speeds on streets that serve as connections to and from freeway ramps, including Bryant Street specifically, and observed that the area's freeway on and off ramps, designed to facilitate multiple lanes of turning traffic, create intersections that are inhospitable to pedestrians. The EIR also said that conflicts between pedestrians and vehicles would increase as a result of the new development and population growth due to rezoning in East Soma. The analysis applies directly to the transportation conditions at the project site, as the site was one of the sites rezoned and exhibits existing conditions consistent with those described in the EIR. The existing pedestrian conditions near the project site and the effects of increased pedestrian activity due to new development were therefore studied in the environmental review. As such, the CPE correctly concludes that the proposed project would not cause new significant impacts under CEQA that were not already analyzed in the underlying Eastern Neighborhoods EIR. With regard to the appellant's concerns about the estimated number of office-related jobs to be added to the project site, the addition of 165 office jobs reported in the CPE was calculated using the 276 square feet per employee ratio, which is standard practice per the department's published transportation guidelines. The appellant's letter states that the number of new office jobs would likely be double that amount, approximately 330 employees, but did not present evidence to support that estimate. Regardless, even if the project did result in 330 new employees, such employment growth still would not exceed the magnitude identified in the Eastern Neighborhoods EIR, and therefore would not change the fact that increased conflicts between pedestrians, bicycles, and cars around the project site are already covered by the analysis as previously discussed. The appellant also stated that the site map provided in the CPE is misleading and does not convey the complexity of the site or the nearby on and off ramps. The department believes that the maps and text in the CPE adequately convey the CEQA-relevant features of the project site and its surroundings. The site plan figure on page 4 of the CPE checklist includes the location and directionality of the freeway ramps, sidewalks, and support columns. The project location map on page 3 also includes labeled streets and freeway ramps. Additionally, these graphics are intended to supplement rather than duplicate the text on pages 1 and 2, which also describes the freeway ramps. Other features identified by the appellant as missing from the figures, such as the retaining wall located across Rincon Street and the divided roadway along Bryant Street 1 block to the east, are not relevant to the environmental review of the proposed project and would not have bearing on the conclusions presented in the CPE because they do not substantially affect traffic and pedestrian access to the site. The maps and graphics in the CPE therefore adequately convey the location and CEQA-relevant features of the project site and its surroundings. The appellant also raised concerns about Caltrans coordination and the proposed signage being visible to drivers on the lower deck of the Bay Bridge. As discussed in the CPE, Caltrans, the operator of the Bay Bridge, has reviewed the proposed project and required the project sponsor to make modifications, including relocation of the signage, to avoid potential vehicular line of sight and right-of-way encroachment issues. The appellant's concern has therefore been addressed through Caltrans review. With regard to the appellant's concerns about people on the proposed roof deck being exposed to poor air quality, the CPE acknowledged that the freeway adjacent location of the project site experiences poor air quality. The CPE further explained that occupants of offices typically do not spend the majority of their lives in the building and are not typically among the age or population groups most vulnerable to health impacts from air pollution. It is also likely that office employees will spend more time inside the building than on the roof deck. The CPE therefore correctly concluded that the proposed project would not result in significant impacts related to exposure of future building occupants to air pollutants. After submittal of our appeal response, additional concerns were raised regarding Vision Zero and the crosswalks adjacent to the project site. As I mentioned, the crosswalk configuration is an underlying existing condition. For CEQA purposes, we can only consider the change between existing conditions and the effects of the proposed project. The proposed office conversion would not create or change the existing crosswalk configuration, and the addition of more pedestrian trips and pedestrian vehicle conflicts has already been analyzed in the Eastern Neighborhoods EIR. As such, no new significant impacts would occur under CEQA. In conclusion, all of the significant environmental impacts of the project were previously studied and disclosed in the Eastern Neighborhoods EIR. The appellant's letter, remarks, and subsequent emails from neighbors have not provided substantial evidence of new significant impacts that were not previously studied. Further environmental review would not change the impacts or mitigation measures found in the CPE, nor would it provide further information relevant to the CEQA conclusions. The department therefore correctly concluded that the proposed project fits within the CEQA criteria for a CPE, and we recommend that the board deny the appeal. This concludes the Planning Department's presentation. I should also mention Elizabeth Waddy and Erica Jackson are available to discuss the department's implementation of Vision Zero policies if desired. Thank you.
Supervisor Kim, you had questions?
Yes, I had a couple of questions for Mr. Uchida. You had mentioned a number of different issues, but I want to start with the office worker per square footage. And so I just want to understand if it's correct, if I heard you correctly, that when studying the number of new office workers, the general assumption is you look at 276 square feet per office worker when you study number of workers in a project.
Yes, we take the total square footage of office space to be created, divide by 276, and that gives us our estimate of the number of new employees.
So this is a data point that comes up frequently in conversations, not just directed to this project. The appellant brought it up, community members have brought it up, but I've also heard it in general when we talk about fees for commercial for new commercial office space in San Francisco. What we now generally see in new office space, particularly with technology companies, is that office workers use considerably less square footage per worker than previously. So the idea of the large cubicle is outdated and people are doing more shared workspaces. And according to a recent article in the New York Times, the average amount of space per office worker in North America has dropped from 225 square feet per office worker in 2010 to 176 square feet in 2012. That's, of course, 3 years ago. I'm curious, outside of, just this appeal alone, when the planning department is thinking of updating how we calculate office worker per square feet, because I certainly think it's important for us to study this. We know these new projects are doing smaller square footage per office workers, and we want to make sure that we're accurately studying these new projects.
Good afternoon, Supervisor Kim. Sarah Jones, Environmental Review Officer. We will be, the number of square feet per office worker is something that is spelled out in our transportation impact analysis guidelines. Mm-hmm. So as Mr. Uchida mentioned, we do our analysis consistent with those published guidelines. We are, within the next year or so, going to be making a lot of changes in our transportation analysis, including an update of those guidelines, and we will need to seek expertise on kind of right-sizing that number because we have to find the right balance between what the immediate trend is and something that will be able to be applied long-term.
Yeah, I just think it's an important long view issue for us to look at. I think it's an issue that's been frustrating to some of our community members as they talk about really how many workers are going to be at the site. Regardless, I understand from Mr. Uchida's comments that even if it is 330 new employees versus 134, was that the calculated number?
165.
165, that regardless there wouldn't be additional review that's needed because that additional number of workers isn't significant. But I do understand frustration from our residents when we're studying the impacts of projects. So we're not really looking at what most people are currently seeing as realistic in terms of per square footage for office workers. And I think that's important to update, especially with the Central SOMA plan coming forward.
Yes, we
to
absolutely
us.
understand updating per current data on the matter.
I just wanted to point out, another frustration I hear a lot from our residents, and that is the point that, the Eastern Neighborhoods environmental impact review has already looked at the existing condition, and we all acknowledge that the existing condition is already problematic. So an unmarked crosswalk does not favor pedestrian access, as you pointed out, but yet there's no new impact because this already exists, whether it's signalized or not. And I guess the question then is, if not through the EIR, what other tools does the planning department have to ensure that we are making Vision Zero our priority in new project plans so it doesn't have to occur through an EIR appeal? Does that question make sense? Because I have been most concerned about safe pedestrian access. The reality is that we will have hundreds of workers, whether new or existing, going to the site. It is a unique and peculiar site. The only access is this unmarked crosswalk, and I think rightly so, our residents are very concerned about their ability to cross safely on Bryant Street, where cars are, rushing to get onto the bridge and often impatient, traffic, et cetera, in this area. So if not through the EIR, what is kind of the point at which the planning department can assert with the project sponsor that these types of conditions need to be input into a project outside of a CEQA appeal?
Sure, I'll respond to that. Thank you, Supervisor Kim. Elizabeth Waddy, Assistant Director of Current Planning. Right now, the Planning Department is implementing Vision Zero policies, and we began doing so as a result of the Commission's adoption of their policy last June. We've done a bunch of internal efforts to make sure that there are internal procedures in place where we can start implementing these policies on a project-by-project basis. But I think what's important to note is the degree to which we can mandate various bike and ped improvements really does vary on the size of the project. So for large projects, we have a very clear process for implementing Vision Zero policies, and this is something that we engage with the developers relatively early on in the process, and we're working to move that point in time even further up to the beginning of the process. But this is for projects that are subject to our streetscape plan requirements. This is Planning Code Section 138.1. There is a requirement that those projects prepare a streetscape plan. That plan is reviewed by an internal team that we've created of urban design experts who are also very familiar with the Vision Zero policies, and they're really focused on choosing, especially for the high injury corridors, making sure that the right ped improvements are incorporated into that streetscape plan. That plan has to be in place in advance of the Planning Commission approval of the project. So I think that's a really rock-solid way that we can implement this, even more so for those projects. All of those projects would require what we call a PPA, or a preliminary project assessment. This is actually before day one of filing any applications, and this is our opportunity to give advice and direction and a roadmap to sponsors, and this is yet another opportunity for us to include those recommendations. I do, though, think it's important to note that for smaller projects where that code requirement is not required.
And if I may just interrupt quickly, what is considered a large project?
Sure.
Just so I understand the threshold.
It's defined in the planning code, so it's a little wonky and detailed, but basically there's two components. One is certain property features, and then coupled with project features. So the property first needs to either be greater than half an acre, contain 250 feet of total lot frontage, or contain frontage encompassing the entire block face between the nearest two intersections. So the property has to look like that. And then the development proposal sitting on that property needs to either be a proposal for new construction or an addition of at least 20% of the existing structure. So all of that has to come into place for the streetscape plan to be required. And then once that streetscape plan is required, we as staff look to see whether it's in one of those high injury corridors. And if it is, we have a very clear process in place through the Better Streets plan to pick and choose those elements that really focus on improving bike and ped safety into that streetscape plan. But if your project doesn't fall within that world and it's one of these smaller projects, we really do have fewer tools in our toolkit that we are allowed to use. We can't mandate additional improvements if we don't either have a nexus or some code derivative from which we can mandate this requirement. We can definitely talk to sponsors, encourage them, and that sort of thing, but we really are limited to the toolkits that really more so apply to those larger projects than small projects.
And I want to appreciate your response to the question, Ms. Wadi. I understand, that we need to focus, that there has to be kind of a threshold by which we look at pedestrian safety and Vision Zero concerns. And it certainly makes sense, of course, to look at large projects or to look at any project on a high injury corridor. Does that include existing projects on a high injury corridor? Because Vision Zero hasn't always been the policy in place for the city, right? So there may be projects that have been built on or around high injury corridors or critical corridors that we didn't have this kind of layer of analysis for, or it wasn't a policy priority before, but now it is. So how are we going to respond to kind of our changing policy priorities?
Well, these changing policy priorities obviously can't be retroactive to projects that have already been approved. We can only work with those projects that are in our department.
But when an existing project is coming back to the board, for example, like this one.
So I think the key for this specific project is it doesn't fall into that bucket of large project. So we do have much fewer tools in our toolkit to implement bike and ped improvements. For those other projects that are currently in the department's pipeline that are considered a large project, it's, as we say, it's law of the day. So if there's a new policy that is needing to implement Vision Zero policies, we will absolutely require that those projects moving forward that have not yet received their approvals will be required to incorporate those policies into their plans.
Okay. I get that the tools don't exist in the toolbox today for the planning department. I'd really love to explore how to expand your toolbox then, because this project clearly calls for pedestrian safety improvements. I mean, it's so obvious. It's a dangerous corridor with cars moving quickly or very slowly because of traffic congestion in this area. An unmarked crosswalk. I mean, everyone acknowledges that doesn't favor pedestrian access. So I would like us to create something where we catch projects such as these earlier, because I believe the project sponsor is committed to pedestrian safety for the new tenants on site. And it's exemplified by the fact that the project sponsor voluntarily agreed to put in a signalized crosswalk prior to today's appeal. I guess it'd be great to do this earlier in the process without, an appeal taking place, our office coming in, negotiating hours before the appeal is taking place. I feel like we could just have a better system for this. And I don't know what the answer to that is, but there has to be a way to catch projects like these that to me feel so obvious that need a pedestrian safety look and analysis.
Again, Sarah Jones. Right now I'm speaking both as environmental review officer and also as a senior manager in the planning department. I actually said the words to Ms. Hester that I never thought I would say, which is that I was glad that she filed this appeal. But I do agree with you that as we develop procedures, there are always situations that arise that weren't what we expected when they're developed. This type of situation brings projects like this to light, and I will be bringing these comments back to the planning department and looking at our procedures to address this.
Great, thank you. I really appreciate that. I'd like to find, an answer for projects like this, so that we can ensure that we're looking at the highest safety standards for our pedestrians as existing projects come back to us, or there are new projects that may not fit in these kind of neat boxes of being a large project on a high injury corridor. Just my last question really is was addressed in your comments, but I really just want to ask it again because it comes up a lot. Are there environmental effects that are peculiar to this project that are not analyzed in the original EIR? And I know you talked about this, but if you can address that specific question again. And was the location of the site at the base of the Bay Bridge analyzed specifically in the Eastern Neighborhood EIR community exemption, CPE, community plan exemption?
So with regard to the question of whether the project would result in peculiar impacts. The definition of a peculiar impact is basically a site-specific impact that was not analyzed in the area plan EIR. And as discussed in the comments, the EIR pointed out that there are adverse pedestrian conditions in East Soma, higher vehicle speeds on streets that serve as connections to and from the freeway ramps. Bryant Street was called out specifically. The EIR also indicated that there are pedestrian unfriendly conditions at the on-ramp intersections that are designed to accommodate multiple lanes of turning traffic, such as the one adjacent to the project site. And it also said that conflicts between pedestrians and vehicles could increase as a result of new development and increased density. And this project site is covered by that because it was among the sites rezoned. It was rezoned from SSO, which is Service Secondary Office, primarily commercial industrial use, to MUO, or Mixed Use Office, a land use designation that favors a higher density office use.
So if it's already called out in the EIR that there are concerns about pedestrian safety, that we already know that this is not a safe site, and that there are problematic existing conditions, why then does it not lead to some form of proposed mitigation in the EIR previously?
Yeah, the Eastern Neighborhoods EIR does contain a number of streetscape improvements. Most of those, in fact all of those, are under the responsibility of SFMTA to implement. Largely because individual project sites are usually just one site on a block, and it really does require a more coordinated city response to make improvements to these streets. So it doesn't really fall neatly on one project sponsor to undertake. There are also fees assessed to projects within the Eastern Neighborhoods Plan area that help pay for these improvements.
Okay, so the expected mitigation is what's been outlined in the plan that we've called upon the city to actually develop, partially funded by the fees generated by projects in this area plan.
That's correct.
Okay. And I know SFMTA is not here, but I do look forward to working with them to ensure that the city is putting into the ground already called for pedestrian safety improvements as we have new workers and residents coming into this area. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Kim. Supervisor Yee?
Thank you, President Bree. Thank you, Supervisor Kim, for your line of questioning in regards to the pedestrian safety issues that the appellant sort of pointed out pretty clearly. I guess I've gone into the bridge through that ramp quite a few times, and I don't think I ever seen a person cross the street right there. If somebody were to cross there, I'd be so surprised I probably would never see the person. Before I go for a solution here, so the developers are willing to put a signal across Bryan, I guess. So if Supervisor Kim were to ask MTA to do a study and to, let's say, get rid of any possibility to cross where everybody's going into the freeway, and then people could actually just cross Bryan and go down the street wherever they have to go. And so it's not unique. We have streets where there are places at corners where you can't cross. You have to cross one way and you go all the way around. So for me, one of the things, the question I have, if we could get MTA to, let's say, make it block that usage of people crossing there, that would be, to me, the solution to this. Not that it's still going to be dangerous regardless, but that will cut the danger by a lot. So the question then becomes, once we get MTA to block it, then it seems like city planning or the planning commission could, or maybe just the developer could do it on their own. The walkway that the appellant was pointing out, coming from the building, that seems to lead to where the dangerous crosswalk, unmarked crosswalk would be. Could we ask that they get rid of that and make all the, regardless of where the doors are, make everything, the pathway will go into the crosswalk where the Bryan Street is? Could city planning require that?
If I may, through the chair, Deputy City Attorney Marlena Byrne, the only reason I'm jumping up to answer this is because through the CEQA appeal process, the board actually, specifically through this process, just has an up or down vote on whether to uphold the Planning Department's environmental review. There may be other mechanisms, of course, that the board can use to work these issues out.
And I'm not saying that, I understand we're voting up and down, but we're talking about this issue right now, and I'm just suggesting that outside of this appeal process, there are probably some mechanisms where we could actually come up with a better solution to the pedestrian safety issues. And I'm just taking this opportunity to say, well, here's a possibility. So I got you.
Thank you, Supervisor Yee. Supervisor Christensen.
I'm more just curious than anything. I wondered if anybody in planning knew the original history of the site, because when the Bay Bridge was built, they leveled everything. And I think there was a lot of soil added around here. So my recollection is there was nothing, there were planted plazas. So like the state police facility that was added further to the west, those were all added to what had originally been open areas. So how on earth did a building land up nestled in the middle of a coiled freeway ramp? At what point? Because that must have been state land, right? So how did a building land up there, and how long has it been occupied? Because that ramp was put in like 80 years ago. The building's not that old. But at what point was that building added, and why? And secondly, if the increasing densities and concern about safety prohibit crossing the freeway on-ramps, then do we essentially condemn this property, and what recourse would the property owner have in that case? Any idea? Does anybody ask where this building came from?
I'll do the first. I can try and answer the first part of the question. We're looking for the exact date in the CPE, but I believe the building was constructed in the 1930s, which would be consistent with it coming after the bridge construction. As far as the second part,
it's certainly an interesting situation. I would say it is. The building was previously occupied. We did our analysis for conservative purposes as if it were not occupied, but this is a change of use. It had been occupied in the past. Interestingly enough, there is an ADA ramp crossing the HOV lanes going straight onto the freeway, which does not appear to be a safe location for crossing. However, apparently it is considered a crosswalk. I think one of the conditions applied by the Planning Commission in the hearing on this was for the project sponsor to work further with MTA around pedestrian crossing. The agreement that was reached by providing a more explicit crosswalk at Bryant Street does provide a better path than exists now, but I think looking at what can be done to prevent people from trying to use that Sterling Street on-ramp to cross the street might be something that would be worthwhile for the users of the site.
Is that it, Supervisor?
Good afternoon, Supervisors. I just wanted to say we did discuss with SFMTA, traffic engineer and public works people.
Can you identify yourself, please?
Devyani Jain, Planning Department staff. We did talk to, preliminarily talk to SFMTA staff as well as public works staff about the possibilities of what can be done on that portion of the ramp as well. No decisions were made, but we brought it up as a source of something that needs to be looked into.
Okay, Supervisor Christensen, is that all? Okay, Supervisor Kim?
Thank you. I just want to reaffirm that, yes, there were meetings that took place with Department of Public Works and SFMTA as well on a signalized crosswalk, and we'll certainly be working with them to help expedite the process so that the project sponsor can put into place a signalized traffic a traffic signalized crosswalk, and that they will be responsible for designing that, which will help with the timeline. I actually just want to re-ask Supervisor Norman Yee's question because he did ask a question that the project sponsor had brought up, which was how the design of the entrance has a pathway that does not lead to where the crosswalk is being proposed to be built. And I believe his question is, can planning require or kind of change that design outside of, the CEQA appeal process?
I think it would be something that we would need to work through with MTA and also with Caltrans, given that it is Caltrans right-of-way in that location. But I think that the project sponsor will also provide some further information around the proposed changes.
So perhaps that could be answered during the project sponsor presentation then.
Yes, definitely. So is there any other line of questioning that we might have? Okay, seeing none. At this time, we're going to move forward with the project sponsor's presentation. You will have 10 minutes.
Thank you, President Breed, and good afternoon, Supervisors. John Kevlin here with Ruben, Junius, and Rose here on behalf of the project sponsor. Before I get into the meat of my comments, let me just speak to a couple things, and I think it'll put some people at ease. There is no door entrance leading towards the southwest in the project. Previously, it had been a loading dock. There's no door there. The only door is the door facing directly towards Bryant Street, which will basically link directly to that crosswalk. So I hope that, and I think I have some other things here that'll increase the comfort with the board. But let me get into the CEQA aspects for a moment. The project at 340 Bryant Street proposes the conversion of the upper 3 floors of the building to office use while maintaining the ground floor of PDR use. The project was unanimously approved by the Planning Commission on January 8th. In short, the appellant has not identified any CEQA significant impact that would require further environmental review. The project was issued a community plan exemption, which is available to projects located in plan areas like eastern neighborhoods when a project is consistent with the zoning. A project consistent with zoning is eligible for a community plan exemption unless the project causes significant environmental impacts not identified by the area plan EIR, and the appellant has failed to identify any new impact caused by the project. The Eastern Neighborhoods EIR did study the conversion of the property to office use. The building was rezoned to mixed-use office, which principally permits office use. The EIR expressly acknowledged conflicts between automobiles, pedestrians, and bicyclists. And it did include improvement measures to be undertaken by the city, developers of new buildings, and also the voluntary efforts of building owners, which I think is what we have here. With respect to the number of workers that were considered on site, the CPE actually set a conservative baseline of 0 current employees, even though the building was occupied by commercial and industrial tenants up through 2013. So the baseline was actually conservative. A significant impact must exist to require additional environmental review, and a mere increase in workers does not automatically create a significant impact. And the Planning Department, using its standard models, did not find that the increase in workers caused a significant impact. So as a result, the appellant has failed to identify any unsafe conditions caused by the project, and therefore the community plan exemption is valid. Now, that being said, everyone here agrees that the existing streetscape conditions in the vicinity of the project are not adequate in their current condition. In fact, the project sponsor reached out to SFMTA regarding this situation as early as 2012. They recognized that there were issues in the area and wanted to get an early start on that. At the time, they were encouraged to wait until the building was occupied by the new tenants before analysis was done to determine what would be the appropriate streetscape measures. In hindsight, we would have hoped to have gotten a different response than that, but it is just shows that the project sponsor has been aware of this issue for quite a while now. The project sponsor has already engaged AECOM, a highly respected transportation consulting firm, to design streetscape changes to improve the safety of pedestrians, bikers, and automobiles. And I'm happy to report to the board today that in working with neighbors and working with Supervisor Kim's office, we have come to a voluntary private agreement with the neighborhood that is going to be where the project sponsor will be pursuing streetscape improvement measures all the way up to a signaled traffic light at this intersection, also including barriers across the entrance to the freeway on-ramp, as Supervisor Yee was mentioning, crosswalk, and also other signage around the site. So we're pleased to say that we do feel like we are the project sponsor is taking on obligations that aren't otherwise required of them that will take care of the situation and result in significant practical improvements to the health and safety of pedestrians and bicyclists in the area. Now, the process requires a number of approvals or input from various governmental agencies, planning, DPW, SFMTA, and Caltrans. So it's not as easy a process as would typically be. But the project sponsor is willing to take this on, and which will result in improved conditions in the area. So ultimately, this is an engineering issue, not really a CEQA issue. The appellant is asking that you send this back to planning to think through the issue more. But the planners are not traffic engineers. They do analysis in response to projects that are filed. The city's traffic engineers are with SFMTA and DPW, as well as with Caltrans. These are the experts. These are the folks that we'll be working with in the coming weeks and months to make sure that the improvements done in the area are going to result in real practical improvements to pedestrian and bicyclist safety. So the single fastest way to achieve real improvements to this street and increase the health and safety of pedestrians and bicyclists is to get this project moving forward. I just want to mention one other thing with respect to CEQA and the Eastern Neighborhoods EIR. This type of appeal can have a number of unintended consequences. It does seem like this might be about one single project, but this is a very modest project. This is a conversion of an existing building. No other work is being done. They're just changing the use inside the existing building. We've got a number of projects in Eastern Neighborhoods where there's new construction going on, significant new amounts of office, significant new amounts of dwelling units, and as the Eastern Neighborhoods EIR recognize, there are poor traffic conditions throughout Eastern Neighborhoods. And so upholding the appeal of this CPE on such a modest project opens the door for all of these projects that are significantly more impactful than this project to a challenge of their CPE, and arguably those would have larger impacts. So the upholding this CPE today could have a number of unintended consequences. But I think our situation stands on its own outside of that. Denying today's appeal will have the actual real-world effect of implementing streetscape improvements in coordination with the neighborhood and input with the neighborhood, which we will continue to be communicating with over the coming months. And we respectfully request that the board deny this appeal and allow the project to move forward. Thank you, and we're here for any questions.
Thank you very much. Supervisor Kim, did you have questions? Okay. At this time, we are going to open it up to public comment for those who are here to support the project sponsor. Can you please come forward? You'll have 2 minutes each.
Thank you, Supervisors. My name is Jim Herron. I'm an architect and a longtime San Francisco resident. I was fortunate to have been a tenant at 340 Bryant from 1991 to 2012, and I'm here in support of the project. I first became aware of Bryant Street building in the late 80s when I visited an art gallery run by some fellow architects with offices in the building. When I opened my own practice in 91, I was fortunate to find a space on the top floor. Initially, the building seemed mostly empty, but that changed in the mid-90s during the first dot-com boom. The owner at the time made some minor improvements, and the spaces filled with tech businesses and graphic designers, public relations firms, photographers, artists, and a few more architects. On the ground floor, there was a shipping warehouse and a retail outlet for distressed furniture. During my 21 years in the building, I saw lots of businesses come and go with the fluctuations of the economy. I feel the proposed occupancy is very appropriate to the building, and to the neighborhood and seems consistent with its recent history. Secondly, speaking as an architect with a strong personal connection to the building, I was optimistic that the new design recognizes and preserves the special qualities that attracted me to it originally while addressing its shortcomings. With regard to the issue of street access, over the 21 years that I was there, I probably crossed the street at least twice a day, and I don't remember it being a huge issue, but I will say that the proposal of adding a dedicated mid-block crosswalk at Bryant Street, similar to the one that's on 2nd Street, mid-block towards South Park, seems like a good idea. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon, Supervisors. I'm Alice Rogers. I live on South Park, and I've been there for about 20 years. I'm here speaking as a neighbor. I applaud highly that this appeal was filed. It created the space for the kind of dialogue that I think was very important, and it encouraged outreach to the neighbors that hadn't happened before. My concern, and I think virtually all the neighbors' concern, is having a top quality, safe crosswalk in this area. To me, pursuing further data points and study doesn't get us that crosswalk. Getting a crosswalk is having an agreement with the sponsor to provide a Vision Zero supported, top quality, safe crossing, and eliminating the unmarked crosswalk at Sterling Street on-ramp. So for me, that is the really positive outcome for this project, and I am willing to support that and support that side agreement so that all of the neighbors' concerns that were raised in our neighborhood meeting would be addressed over the development process of the crosswalk design. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon, Supervisors. My name is Charles Withers. I'm an active commercial real estate broker in the Soma area. I represent our team works with a number of PDR users, and it's been extremely hard to find adequate space. Here's a developer who bought the building based on MUO zoning and is embracing and welcoming PDR. We work with a low-cost winemaker and educator, a wearable devices maker for educational purposes, as well as a electric car charging station maker. And here's someone who's welcomed these tenants and wants to find a home for them, and we can't do anything because the project's been delayed. So obviously we need this project to move forward as quickly as possible for tenants like these. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the public that'd like to speak in support of the project sponsor at this time? Seeing none, public comment is closed. And finally, before we move forward, we will have an up to 3-minute rebuttal from the appellant or the appellant representative.
Sue Esther, again, this is not about cumulative issues. It's about site. I'm almost embarrassed about the department because they botched this one. They had the responsibility to identify the problems, work through the problems, create a discussion at planning, at the commission. I created the opportunity by filing this appeal, which is wrong. It's wrong. It shouldn't happen this way. The planning department still does. The environmental review still cites the pages that I said in my brief. The EIR pages that were cited in my brief had page numbers. The Bryant Street on-ramps that are talked about are the on-ramps of 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th. Read them, Kansai. They're there. I gave page numbers. There was an analysis in the Eastern Neighborhoods EAR about the freeway ramps. They're in the central part of the Soma. They don't talk at all about 2nd Street on-ramp. Zero. So even when you put it in writing, they don't even go back and read it. Secondarily, not us. It needs to be MTA works it out. What the hell is the reason that we have a planning department for? They're supposed to look at the building and look at the context. They didn't scream bloody murder in the staff report. Staff report, general planning. You should be raising these issues. It should be an environmental review at the first place. The second place is doing the project analysis. You don't just put a cover on what you get from the developer. You actually analyze something. Planning department shouldn't be charging for this kind of work. Vision Zero is a planning commission policy as well. You don't kick it down the road like I just heard the explanation. If there is any site that's a dangerous site in central Soma, in this area, this is it. And it didn't fall within any of the categories. And so therefore you don't evaluate it. I am embarrassed for the planning department. You have shown you don't look at project sites. Why do I have to be the person who looks at them? You look at a flat map. These are hills. This is a big hill, Rincon Hill. It's solid rock. That's why the Bay Bridge lands there. You have to identify a problem and work through it. You're planners. You have that degree. I'm embarrassed for you.
Thank you very much. Okay. At this time, this hearing item number 22 has been held and is now closed. This item is in the hands of the board. Item number 23, 24, and 25 are before us today. Supervisor Kim.
Thank you, President Breed. First, just a couple of things. I do want to thank the project sponsor before us today for 340 Bryant for voluntarily committing through this process to a signalized crosswalk in front of 340 Bryant, even though it is not mandated mitigation via the EIR CEQA study, ensuring the safety of our new tenants on that site and, of course, pedestrians in the neighborhood. We will certainly be working with SFMTA and DPW to make sure that we can expedite the crosswalk that the project sponsor will be paying for in terms of design and implementation. We appreciate this commitment to the neighborhood. The appeal has brought forward, I think, some structural concerns that I have as to how the planning department and the city addresses specific pedestrian safety issues that are already acknowledged when existing projects come before us or new projects that are smaller come before us that might be on critical corridors or high injury corridors. I really appreciate the dialogue between the planning department and myself today throughout this appeal, and I really look forward to working on how to expand that toolbox. Vision Zero is a new policy as of last year. This board put this forward. Both Supervisor Avalos and Supervisor Yee led that initiative, and I want to make sure that we are updating our procedures to ensure that we can bring up these issues earlier on. I think not only does it ease concerns of our neighborhood that we are keeping these priorities in mind, but I think it's also helpful for the project sponsor. I think it would have been easier for them to commit to these earlier in the development well, not the development phase, but in the planning phase than today. And I would really like to make sure that we work on that. Second, I brought up, updating how we look at office worker per square footage. I know this is going to be a big issue with the Central Soma plan as we look at updating potential jobs housing linkage fee and other impact fees. We want to make sure that we are correctly assessing the number of office workers that are coming in as we build new office space or rehabilitate current office space to what the actual impact is. And I think the outdated model of these large cubicles, I'm actually glad that we're moving past it, and I look forward to our city departments also to moving past these kind of office structure, because I think that what we're seeing today is a more efficient use of our office space. Finally, I do want to thank our residents who brought this issue before us to our office, and want to recognize Alice Rogers from the South Park Improvement Association, Katie Lydell from the South Beach Rincon Hill Mission Bay Neighborhood Association, and of course Nicole Schneider from WACA-SEF for working with our office, attending countless meetings with the project sponsor to ensure that we could get to this conclusion of a signalized crosswalk. And what I will be moving forward today is approval of item 23 and to table item 24 and 25. And I will be asking the board to support me on that motion.
Okay, Supervisor Kim has made a motion to approve item number 23 and table item 24 and 25, and that's seconded by Supervisor Farrell. Without objection, roll call vote.
Supervisor Yee?
Aye.
Yee, aye. Supervisor Avalos?
Aye.
Avalos, aye. Supervisor Breed?
Aye.
Breed, aye. Supervisor Campos?
Aye.
Campos, aye. Supervisor Christensen?
Aye.
Christensen, aye. Supervisor Cohen?
Aye.
Cohen, aye. Supervisor Farrell?
Aye.
Farrell, aye. Supervisor Kim? Kim, aye. Supervisor Marr?
Aye.
Marr, aye. Supervisor Tang?
Aye.
Tang, aye. Supervisor Wiener?
Aye.
Wiener, aye. There are 11 ayes.
Colleagues, the community plan exemption is finally affirmed unanimously. Madam Clerk, can you please read adoption without committee reference?
Items 28 through 30 are being considered for immediate adoption without reference to committee. A single roll call vote may enact these items. If a member objects, a matter can be removed and considered separately.
Colleagues, is there anyone here who would like to? Supervisor Wiener?
29.
29. Anyone else? Okay. Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll on item number 28 and 30?
Supervisor Yee?
Aye.
Yee, aye. Supervisor Avalos?
Aye.
Avalos, aye. Supervisor Breed?
Aye.
Breed, aye. Supervisor Campos?
Aye.
Campos, aye. Supervisor Christensen?
Aye.
Christensen, aye. Supervisor Cohen?
Aye.
Cohen, aye. Supervisor Farrell?
Aye.
Farrell, aye. Supervisor Kim?
Aye.
Kim, aye. Supervisor Marr?
Aye.
Marr, aye. Supervisor Tang?
Aye.
Tang, aye. Supervisor Wiener?
Aye.
Wiener, aye. There are 11 ayes.
Those items are adopted unanimously. Madam Clerk, can you please read item number 29?
Item 29 is a resolution to denounce Indiana State Senate Bill 101, co-authored by Senators Cruz, Schneider, and Steele, a law that permits discrimination against the lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender community under the guise of religious freedom.
Supervisor Wiener.
Thank you, Madam President. Given the changes in that particular bill, turning it from extremely toxic to at least less problematic, but certainly not great, I'd like to, Supervisor Campos and I would like to continue this 1 week so we can figure out how to amend the resolution to conform with the changes we've seen over the past week.
Okay, Supervisor Wiener has made a motion to continue this item 1 week to the meeting of April 14th, seconded by Supervisor Campos. Can we take this, colleagues, without objection? Without objection, this item is continued to the meeting of April 14th. Madam Clerk, is there any in memoriams?
Yes, Madam President. Today's meeting will be adjourned in memory of the following beloved individuals. On behalf of Supervisor Christensen, for the late Miss Laura Mattos and Mr. Melvin Patterson.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, is there any other items before us today?
That concludes our business for today.
We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.